Jim, you have to speak through your microphone. We can't hear you.
It's nice to be heard. Thanks, Sue. My apologies. I was just welcoming you to the meeting, Sue. I hope you enjoy it this afternoon. We have a number of delegations, a fairly full agenda this afternoon, presentations from staff on affordable housing, and also an update on our paramedic services. I'd like to invite Julie Hall to conduct the roll call.
Regional Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Craig.
Present.
Councillor Deutschman. Chair Erb.
Present.
Councillor Foxton. I see you're online there.
Present.
Councillor Harris, I believe, is
Yep.
Yep.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Hunick.
Chair Erb is awesome.
Councillor James.
Present.
Councillor Liggett.
Present.
Councillor McCabe.
Present.
Councillor Nowak. Councillor Salonen.
Present.
Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Councillor Burbanovich. Councillor Williams.
Present.
And Councillor Wolf.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. As we begin this meeting, we are again reminded that many of our homes and places of employment in Waterloo region are situated on the land that is traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anabashibe, and Chitone peoples. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to Waterloo region, and we also recognize the contributions Indigenous peoples have made in shaping and strengthening this community. We are grateful for the opportunity to live and work here and reaffirm our collective commitment to keep the promise and challenge of truth and reconciliation real and intentional in our region. Do we have a mover and a seconder to move back into, reconvene into open session? Moved by Councillor Hunick, seconded by Chair Redmond. Do you please use your e-scribe buttons to indicate your support? Okay. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act?
Chair.
I apologize, Councillor Liggett.
I'm not sure if I do. I'm still awaiting advice from our integrity commissioner, but to err on the side of caution, 7.1.1 as I lease part of a property.
7.1.1?
Correct.
Thank you. That'll be so noted. We have several delegations, some in person, some online today. Before we hear from the delegations, I'd like to remind my colleagues that the questions are to be directed to the delegations and that staff will be speaking about the matters at a later date in the agenda. For the information of the delegations, if you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in immediate removal from the meeting, interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, turning your camera on at inappropriate times, and hate speech or defamatory comments. And one last reminder for delegations, please don't take any offense if following your presentations there are no questions from council. This is council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas shared with us from community members. And as we have a full agenda today, we might want to limit the number of questions by saying or indicate the number of speakers that are in the queue that I will indicate of that. Our first speaker is Megan Walker from the Eviction Prevention Waterloo Region. Megan, I think, is here in the audience and has 5 minutes. Megan.
I'm actually online.
Oh, you're online. I apologize.
I am, yes. It's okay. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much. Good afternoon, Council. I'm Megan with the Eviction Prevention Team at the Social Development Centre of Waterloo Region. First of all, I'd like to thank you for funding our program through Fee for Service. Your partnership will help us support even more people and make sure people stay housed safely and with dignity. It also demonstrates to me that council recognizes the housing crisis is an eviction crisis, and we need to approach the situation from all angles. And that is why I am here to support this motion to adopt the Affordable Housing Policy and Program Incentive. I'd also commend city staff with whom we've had the pleasure to connect with at eviction prevention, and I'd like to commend them as well on the plan to end chronic homelessness. Homelessness occurs through multiple vectors, and ensuring everyone in the region is housed with dignity and respect requires a varied and holistic approach. And again, that's why I'm supporting the motion to adopt this affordable housing policy. Working at eviction prevention, many of the tenants I support and peer support live in affordable housing where landlords seek to displace them because they're incentivized to. The market allows them to, and it benefits them. Elders, people with disabilities, people on social supports, all of whom have nowhere to go and have lived in their units for a very long time, represent an opportunity for greater profit. This, coupled with the fact that we are losing affordable housing stock at a rate far greater than we are building it, there's simply no place for anyone to go. There's nowhere to go. I'm told every day that there's no place for my tenants that I support on a one-on-one basis, that they have nowhere to go. I'm repeating that because it's dreadful and heartbreaking. And I'm also often how this can just happen, how the world can be in such a state that people can just be displaced from their houses after 20 years. So I think that this motion specifically is a really good first step and will help clear the way for vital and necessary bylaws and reforms that we need across the region. And it will help the way that we approach housing and homelessness and making sure everybody has a place to live and can stay where they are and no longer have to be afraid of where to go, because there is no place to go. Thank you very much.
For keeping under the limit, are there any questions of the delegation? Thank you. Our next delegate is Sean Campbell from Union Cooperative. Sean, you want to come to the podium, please?
Well, thanks everybody for the opportunity to be here today. As introduced, my name is Sean Campbell. I'm here with Union Cooperative. I'm a lifelong resident of Waterloo region, and as so many of you have seen and experienced as well, you know, our community is growing up, is changing in a really exciting way, but it's not working right for everyone. And that's why we started Union Cooperative way back in 2018, purchased our first property in 2022 as a community response of folks who don't want to sit on the sidelines any longer, who want to step forward and try and help our neighbors. If you can go to the next slide, please. So this is the first building that we bought, or two buildings, for $16.5 million in 2022 without any government capital support. This has 58 two-bedroom units. It's right up against the expressway. We have the Beyond Housing building just at the north end of the photo. This is an older property. It was built back in the 60s. And we have some really long-term tenants here who have called this community home for a long time. Next slide, please. We can see some photos from the inside. It looks like any other apartment in our community. Currently, tenants are saving about $700,000 a year relative to renting a new two-bedroom unit. Since taking ownership, although we've been able to apply for above rent guideline increases, we haven't. There's been zero. There have been zero evictions. Even when some tenants have had a hard time, we've been able to work with them and our community partners. And as more affordable units become available, we've worked with three great local charities, including Reception House and Women's Crisis Services, to support folks who face multiple complex barriers to accessing housing. Next slide, please. It's a little hard to make out here, but you can see in the top left just the increase in rental rates right now by occupancy. So it's moving up a lot more slowly for folks who are staying in their homes, long-term tenants. So increasingly there's a gap between these long-term tenants, these older apartments, and market housing. It's why it's such an attractive target for real estate investment trusts and big investors, because you can push out or wait out those existing long-term tenants and increase the rents. The slide on the top right, or the graphic on the top right, shows that. Units or buildings that are older are experiencing the quickest increase in rents across the market. The next closest are the ones that aren't rent controlled on the far right, but still, even units that aren't rent controlled aren't increasing as quickly as these older properties with long-term tenants and low rents. And we can see now on the bottom, the cost of renting a one or two bedroom unit is getting much higher than what many low-income folks have access to. Next slide, please. So for our property, and a lot like ours, we pay about twice the property tax rate of a new apartment building that has really high rental rates, and about twice the tax rate of a new single family home in our community. About 36% of our operating expenses go to property tax, or about $200, I think it shows up there, $210 per month per tenant. So if we're trying to keep rental rates really low, this is a really important tool that we can look at. Well, how do we bring down those rental rates or those property tax rates? Next slide, please. And this just shows what I mentioned before. So existing apartment buildings pay about twice the property tax of new apartments and single-family homes, despite providing some of the most affordable rents in our community. We can see here the additional equity that's required when we're paying full property tax. So we can cut our equity per unit by about 30–40% with a property tax reduction. That's really important. If you think of any community group, the hardest thing for us when we're trying to purchase a property on the open competitive market is the equity layer. So if we're able to increase our bank mortgage by decreasing the equity required on a per unit basis, we can move more quickly, preserve more of these units, keep them in community ownership. Next slide, please. A lot of information here. Happy to dig into it in the Q&A after, but it does show different properties that are currently or have been sold in the past year, and the difference in the equity required, anywhere from 65 to 85% loan to value that we can achieve with a property tax reduction.
If I just may interrupt for a second, Sean, you're down to your last 30 seconds.
Okay, thanks. This is an existing tool that will be presented or has been proposed. It's already available to council under the Municipal Act. It has no cost to the corporation, and it's a really efficient way of spreading costs across our community in order to help advance affordable housing. Some of the most affordable housing in our community exists in old apartments in Cambridge and the rural townships. Now's the time for us to act and bring those into community ownership, and we need this as a way to be more competitive against the private sector that knows that they can increase rental rates. If we know that we can rely on a decrease in property tax, we can go out there and buy these units. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Sean. I think we have some questions from council. Can I get that on my screen? Okay, we have quite, okay. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. And thanks, Sean, for coming in today, and as well to the other delegations. And thanks for the work you're doing through Union Co-op. I'm a big fan of the work that you're doing. And I know we've had a couple of conversations about the property tax exemption that you're talking about today. I'm curious, though, if you could explain for me, because I believe that you've talked to a couple of representatives from the city of Waterloo about the property tax exemption, and so I'm just curious about how those discussions went, what the outcome was, and why you're here today versus at a local municipality like the city of Waterloo.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I had originally approached this as a lower tier problem, and I went to the city of Waterloo and the city of Kitchener, speaking with staff there. So the CAOs at both of those cities, as well as planning staff and finance staff. And I was told by both municipalities that they just don't have the authority to move with a property tax exemption, that I had to come to the region. And if we look at the Municipal Act, it's really quite clear that lower tiers have the ability to implement a property tax exemption policy only if the region moves first. So what I appreciate about this policy here is it empowers lower tiers, but it doesn't require anything of lower tiers. What we see in the staff report and in the bylaw is an interest in engaging lower tiers to see if they'd like to collaborate. But regardless of how lower tiers would like to approach this, it doesn't force anything upon a city or a township.
And just a quick follow-up, if I can. Do you, with your expertise, do you know if Bill 23, when those regulations are established, will that change?
No. As far as I know, it will not change.
Okay. Thank you, Sean. Thanks again for your work.
Thank you.
Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the your delegation today. My question really revolves around the fact that if, in fact, there is a property tax exemption, then it's a loss of revenue for the municipality that has to be picked up by everybody else. Is that how I understand the argument that you're using?
You're absolutely right. So the region or the city would, in this case, the region would still collect the same amount of tax revenue. It would change who it's being collected by. In this case, if I can provide a bit more information, Councillor Craig, I think the reason it's justified here is because the cost to a taxpayer is very low. You know, we're looking at, for a property like ours, well less than $1. The number of properties that we can think of applying for and participating in this program will also unfortunately be quite low, because the region, to its credit, in this bylaw has suggested a 60-year term and some fairly significant penalties for breaking the affordability covenants. It's highly unlikely that a private sector actor will choose voluntarily to do this. So we're talking about a fairly small number of organizations. Charities can already go to Superior Court and petition to have a full property tax exemption, so they also won't need to rely on this policy here. The other piece to think about as well is just back in 2019, the local apartment association came before council and made the case that they're providing a lot of affordable units in our community, below market rent units just in these older apartments. And they asked for a full property tax reduction across the entire multi-residential property tax class. At the time, regional staff looked at this and said that that would result in about $115 extra that each single-family homeowner would have to pay in property tax each year. And that was one of the reasons why council ultimately decided not to move ahead with that. What this policy does here is it targets this to only organizations who are willing to put their money where their mouth is, sign an agreement guaranteeing that they'll provide long-term affordability, and that will significantly reduce the number of properties that this applies to, while still providing the option for private sector actors who would like to participate. So I think ultimately it provides an argument for the region why to continue to not reduce that broader multi-residential tax class.
Yeah, I'm very interested in what you're talking about, but I certainly want to hear from regional staff what the implications are across the board for other taxpayers. So, no, I appreciate your delegation. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
I'm wondering, do you want to respond to that now, Mr. Dyer? The question on, I think that was reported in, or that was included in the report of what the percentage was. But go ahead.
Excuse me. Yes, thank you, and through the chair, I would say that I guess a couple of things. The delegation is correct in stating that this is not a revenue loss for the region, right? And if we think about the conversations that we've had through a couple of budget processes, in this case, regional council sets a levy each year, and we have an assessment base over which to collect those taxes. So it's basically levy divided by your assessment base is your tax rate. So the levy doesn't change. What changes, in I think a very small way, is the overall amount of the assessment base. Because you would take a property that would otherwise be a taxable assessment and make it exempt. And by virtue of that, you've got a slightly lower denominator, and so a fractionally higher tax rate. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Deichmann.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so just to follow up, and I took it that if you have 10 buildings that are paying tax, you take one of them out, then now 9 are paying the same amount of tax instead of the 10. And if it did require an increase in taxes, $150,000, which is what Union is paying, for example, if 1% is $7 million, this is like a 0.02% increase in the levy if it came to that sort of thing. But I take what you're saying is it's not requiring that. It's just spreading this amount over other properties. And I just want to clarify, Sean, I think you had mentioned this, that this is something the region can do, because you had mentioned you went to the area municipalities first. And I know you did come to the region prior term to inquire about this, because I know it was on a tracking list for a long period of time. But the region can do this, and area municipalities can decide if they want to participate or not. No pressure on them, but the region could do its part with respect to this if we so desired here at the Horseshoe. Is that correct?
That's right. And if the region decides not to, then the municipalities do not have the authority to do this on their own.
Okay. So the only other thing that you raised, I had a question about, but it might be a staff thing, although I know you're a smart guy and you would know this answer to this too, probably. But so we charge a higher portion of the tax amount, like the 1 point. It was your chart that showed it was 1% for new build and 1 point whatever percent for older build. And I'm just wondering, is that I don't know if Mr. Dyer could answer that, whether that's a policy decision to encourage new build, but you raise a question about encouraging us to keep existing build with a lower with a lower rental rate. So that's my question, though. Is that something that we have a power to deal with come tax time?
So, okay, you're going to respond to the question, Mr. Dyer. Go ahead.
So through the chair, there's a few questions in there. The answer to the last question is yes. This is an annual decision that upper and single-tier municipalities need to make in the province of Ontario, which is a decision to establish tax ratios for the year. That's a report that will be coming forward to Administration Finance Committee in April. And the delegation is correct in showing that the tax ratio for the multi-residential class is currently 1.95, and for residential and for what's referred to as new multi-residential, the ratio is 1. This goes back to the property tax reform days of the late 1990s. There was a time, I think in the early 2000s, where regional council, over a period of years, reduced the commercial, industrial, and multi-residential ratios till they all got to the same point at 1.95, and they've remained there, since. So basically, a property that was built before 2001 will pay a higher tax rate than a property that had a building permit issued in 2001 or later.
Okay, so just to follow up quickly on that, Chair, then do we have the opportunity to review this when the report comes back in April, as you suggest, for future tax ratio considerations?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I respond to that as well?
Certainly.
So I think an important piece to recognize here is when we're looking to buy a property in the open market, we're competing against real estate investment trusts, which we know put in a bid on the property that we ultimately purchased, and we're only going to win if we provide a better price. So if you are a REIT or a private investor, you know that you can afford price X because you'll increase the rents. If we want to be able to equally compete without increasing the rents, there's got to be a give somewhere. So a property tax advantage for affordable housing organizations is actually really helpful versus reducing the class for everybody. You're asking someone to say, if we're going to provide you this incentive, we're not going to expect trickle down to our tenants. Because in fact, one of the big concerns that was raised in that 2019 staff report was that we don't want to shift from 1.95 to 1 as a ratio overnight, because it would be a $110 increase for every single family homeowner and businesses in our community. So in fact, we want to phase it in over time. Now the problem is the Residential Tenancies Act says if you phase it in over time, if it's not a significant decrease, you don't have to pass it on to your tenants. So all of a sudden we're decreasing operating expenses without asking for anything in return. If instead we do have a significant decrease, well, now we're incentivizing rent eviction and other ways of removing those tenants so we can get back up to market rent. Importantly, when we think about a $75,000 property tax reduction for our property, thinking that it may not be the full 150, but if it's 75, because of the number of units that meet the affordability threshold, That would allow us to increase our mortgage by about $2 million, the principal of our mortgage. So we can go a lot further all of a sudden, reducing the amount of money we need to raise from the community and charitable foundations. If instead you provide that $75,000 discount to a private sector actor, you're not just increasing their operating income in each year, but for the current owner, you're increasing their wealth by $2 million. That doesn't pass on to the next person because it's baked in. So I think we have to be careful when we are thinking about this from a tax equity standpoint, that we could actually be creating a lot of private wealth without getting anything in return. What this policy does really nicely is it limits the number of folks who are going to participate to people who are willing to sign on the line, guaranteeing that they'll meet the affordability criteria. So I think it's an important tool here for us to consider.
Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Well, actually, you've just answered a couple of my questions. And and I'd like to also thank you for answering some of them yesterday on the phone.
Could you maybe take your microphone a little closer to you?
Okay, sorry. What class folks do you think that you would be gearing your product to?
So for us, and what the policy says is 80% average market rent or less for a unit to qualify. So in a property like ours, likely 60% of our apartments would qualify and get that tax reduction. The other 40% remain market. That's how we're able to purchase a property like this. And we're seeing more and more of that kind of blended income approach in affordable housing just to make the math work. So we are supporting folks from Reception House, recently arriving government-assisted refugees, families from Women's Crisis Services who are moving out of shelter, but also just working class folks as well. I think that's a really important piece to recognize for this tool is registered charities can already go to Superior Court and petition for a reduction in their property taxes. So they don't need a tool like this. Registered charities are doing incredible work in our community and are receiving a lot of capital grants from the region to do that work. What we don't have any support from federal, provincial, or municipal levels to do is to acquire these existing low-rent buildings that provide great long-term, low-cost homes to working-class folks and retirees. Charities don't do a good job of doing that. In Canada, in order to receive a charitable benefit, you need to be poor. Charities can't stop someone from becoming poor. They can only help them once they are sufficiently poor. So we have this system that as we're increasingly having market rate rents increase, there's a bigger and bigger gap between social housing and the market. We need other players in there who are nonprofits and co-ops who can provide stable housing for working class folks who can live independently. So for us, someone working full-time minimum wage and a partner working part-time can afford $13.25. Someone working on their own for $22 to $25 an hour can afford a two-bedroom. It gets cheaper if it's a one-bedroom, but for us, they're all two-bedroom units.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Hunek.
Through the chair, thank you so much, Sean, for coming today. You are so knowledgeable and you outlined this so succinctly. I just want to make sure that my colleagues are aware that the tax exemption that you're advocating for will ultimately cost the taxpayer far less than if we were to build and manage the housing crisis on our own. So, yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much. You're absolutely right. If you think of a $75,000 reduction, you can get a $2 million mortgage principal. Just based on the time value of money, folks would rather pay it over a longer amount of time than all up front. That's a huge impact that we can have right there.
Councillor Schatz.
Thank you for the presentation. It's been very helpful to help me sort of wrap my mind around it. And I'm not sure if this is a question for you or for Craig, but can you explain a little bit more about how impact fits into this? Because as I look through the report that staff put together, we report to impact what we're going to charge for taxes. So we do that now. So help me with the nuance of how this is different from what we've been doing, because I'm having trouble with that. And maybe it's for Craig.
Do you want to respond to that, Mr. Dyer?
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. So MPAC's responsibility in the property tax system in Ontario is to assess every property. That's their primary role, and they do that by in a number of different ways, but taking a great amount of guidance from the Assessment Act, and every year an assessment roll is returned to each municipality that shows the property, its property class, and its value, and it's on that basis that we calculate our tax rates and do our tax billing, which of course is done at the local level here in Waterloo Region. So MPAC's role in this case would be, so let's assume the program has been put in place. We have a new housing capital facilities bylaw. We've entered into an arrangement with a housing provider based on the program criteria set out in the report. That agreement would go to MPAC, and MPAC would do what they do for every other property in the province, which is to assess it. And they would determine the class, they would determine the value. And in this case, the likely outcome then is that they would take a property that is currently, let's say, a taxable property in the multi-residential class, and they would revert some or all of it to an exempt status. And that would all depend on whether affordability is across the entire building or whether it's only a certain number of units. That's an exercise that they would go through, and then they would update that information on the assessment roll. So that's the role that they would play. And how it would be experienced in the municipality is, you recall, for example, during our budget process, we talked about assessment growth. In this case, where a property moves from taxable to exempt, we then have a fractionally smaller level of assessment growth. And that's how we would experience it here at the region and at the local level as well, assuming that they would be participating.
Okay. Is this back to Mr. Dyer or to the delegation?
To Mr. Dyer, if that's okay.
All right. Well, one more, and then I'm going to try, when we get to the next delegations, that we try and focus on delegations as opposed to staff.
Thank you for that. So now we have some units that are exempt, right? Or that have a lower tax or affordable housing, or I'm maybe using the wrong terminology, but do we not currently have units that would fall under a similar sort of situation? And are we not reporting those to MPAC? So I don't understand how this is different from what we're doing now.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and through the chair, it's different because it's going to allow properties who would otherwise not be eligible for an exemption under the Assessment Act to now become exempt. So, for example, in the Assessment Act, which is an interesting read, every property is taxable except for a very long list of exemptions. One of them is land owned and used by any charitable, nonprofit, philanthropic corporation organized for the relief of the poor if the corporation is supported in part by public funds. So if an existing property meets that criteria and legal representatives from MPAC agree with that, that property will already be on the roll as exempt. The properties we're looking to include in this program are not those properties. If a property can get an exemption through the Assessment Act, then that's the approach that they should take, right? But the properties that regional staff are looking to help in order to maintain long-term affordability are not able to get that exemption right now. And that's what this program does.
Any other questions to our delegation? Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Our next delegation is Tessa DeChille from Kitchener. You have 5 minutes. Welcome.
Good afternoon, esteemed members of the Council. My name is Tessa DeChille, and I am a tenant of 250 Frederick Street. I stand before you today not just as a resident, but a member of this community, a community that has been my home for over 12 years. I am grateful for this opportunity to address you on a matter that has deeply affected not only my life, but the lives of my neighbors and fellow residents. On the evening of January 31st, several of my neighbors and I received an N13 notice in the mail. The prospect of rent eviction has not only left us anxious and disheartened, but it's also eroded the notion of what home means to us as renters. The affordable rent we have in our building has allowed my fiance and I to start saving for a house, a dream we now may have to postpone. This isn't just our story. It's a narrative shared by many renters in our community facing uncertainty and displacement due to corporate decisions that prioritize profit over people. The motions discussed today will help strengthen tenant rights and secure affordable housing, and I urge Council to approve. Navigating the current rental market, I have come face to face with a stark reality that finding a comparable unit would mean doubling our monthly rent. In response, I've dedicated time to educating myself on tenant rights, exploring similar cases, and collaborating with local advocacy groups such as Acorn. As I stand before you today, I carry not only my personal concerns, but the concerns of those, like me, who seek the stability of a home that doesn't compromise their financial future. The need for affordable housing isn't just a theoretical concept. It's a pressing reality that demands our attention and concerted efforts. While this experience has been stressful for me and my fiance, my thoughts often turn to my elderly neighbors, many of whom are on fixed incomes and pensions. The complexities of the situation can be overwhelming, especially for those not fully versed in their rights as tenants. The fight for tenants' rights extends beyond our personal circumstances and aims to protect those who may be least equipped to navigate such situations. I would genuinely like to celebrate the efforts that the region has been making to secure affordable housing. However, it is equally crucial to protect the existing affordable options that we have. Our building is one such option. It's been affordable housing for residents living on ODSP, pension, and on fixed incomes for years, and in some cases, decades. And it's at risk of being taken away. Housing as a basic human need should not be a commodity exploited for profit. Our homes are not just physical structures. They are the bedrock of our lives, and the potential loss of affordable housing threatens the stability of our community. The pursuit of profit should not come at the expense of displacing those who have long called this place home. To address the urgent need for stronger tenant protections and the preservation of our region's affordable housing, I implore Council to consider and approve the recommended motions. These are important steps in preserving existable affordable housing in the region. In closing, I urge each council member to consider the faces behind my words, the families, the elderly, and the vulnerable members of our community who rely on your decisions. As stewards of our shared well-being, your support for the proposed motions is not merely a vote. It is a commitment to safeguarding affordable housing in our region. Let us fortify our community against the erosion of affordable housing and work together in upholding the dignity and security that every person deserves within the walls of their home. Thank you for your time, consideration, and I hope your support for tenant rights.
Thank you, Tessa. Do you want to remain at the podium? I think there's Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you, Chair Erb, and thank you for coming in to speak. I just want to outline a few things so that you're clear too, as I'm learning through all of this, and I want to share the knowledge that I've gained with respect to this issue on rent evictions. Okay, so it's an area municipality responsibility to deal with rent eviction bylaws. Okay, now Hamilton recently passed something, but they're a single tier. So unfortunately, the region can't pass a rent eviction bylaw. It's a single tier responsibility. Second, I think it's very important as your group, your tenants, that you gather with people like Acorn and the Social Development Center and understand your rights under the Landlord-Tenant Board, okay? And the one good thing for you, which is unfortunately a difficult situation in the province, is the Landlord-Tenant Board is a mess, okay? And so that's going to cause delays. So you're going to have time to fight, to advocate all of this, but I just want to encourage you, Are you planning to advocate at the area municipalities as well in City of Kitchener?
Yes, so
Okay.
I have been working to organize tenants into a union. Is it okay that I respond, Chair?
Yeah, I'm asking you a question.
Of course,
yeah.
sorry. Yes, so I'm organizing my tenants currently. We're working with Acorn to organize as a union. We have plans to talk with the Kitchener City Hall, all of those levels as we are in Kitchener. So my main goal here is just to support these motions that are being
Yeah.
put forward as they're so.
No, that's good. I just wanted to make sure that you understood, because I did a Renoviction Town Hall, and Maribel Juggerin from Trainer, you may have met with her as well. Their group is also going through the similar situation, and it's been over a year that they've been able to hold off on this situation. So I encourage you to use every tool that you have, and also contact the Waterloo Region Community Legal Services for advice and assistance as well. So I'll be watching closely. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Thanks for appearing. Our next delegate is Dan Clements, who has 5 minutes, and I think Dan is online. Are you there, Dan?
Yeah. Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, go ahead.
Very good. Good afternoon, Chair Urban Committee members. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Dan Clements from Cambridge, and I'm here today to encourage you to support the recommended motion in Section 7.1, Strategic Priority Homes for All. I'm a member of Citizens for Cambridge, a group of citizen volunteers applying both thought and effort to better our community in progressive ways. We are not experts, but doing research and listening to experts is at the core of our volunteer work. As you know, we are keen supporters of affordable housing over parking lots. Thank you again for your support of this concept that involves municipalities providing low cost or no cost parking lot access to affordable housing providers. We believe this concept can be a game changer in the right situations. We've invested countless hours working with affordable housing developers and experts. It is with that background that we're here today to urge you to support the motion in front of you. It seems too easy to pass the buck on critical affordable housing issues and opportunities by saying simply that's a regional responsibility. It is our sincere hope that the 7 municipalities in our region will join with the region in a united effort to execute on the initiatives outlined in this motion. Let's make it a unanimous initiative for the whole region. In conclusion, we all know that there is no one answer for the affordable housing crisis that we find ourselves in. It did not happen overnight, and there are many pieces that all need to be worked on. Please embrace this opportunity to take one significant step forward. There will be more to come. Your positive decision on this motion will directly enhance the lives of region residents and help pave the way to better tackle this serious crisis. Thank you again for this admirable effort to do something about a crisis. It's time. Well done. Thank you very much for listening. I hope it helps.
Thanks, Mr. Clements. Are there any questions? And just for clarification, Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Erb. Dan, thanks so much for coming forward. Can you just speak from your perspective about the timing of this motion? I know we're all in a housing crisis. Some people have wondered at why we're dealing with this at this juncture. I know staff brought forward a report. I'm just wondering from your perspective if time is of the essence.
Yeah, that's a great question. We've had discussions within our group about exactly that. And one of the points that I didn't put into my presentation today is the urgency. It really is absolutely urgent. And without piling on too much, I'm sure you know it's urgent. Everyone is aware of that. But it's definitely something we talk about all the time. You know, we need to move on some of these priorities. And this is a terrific opportunity to take the first step here.
Just for clarification, the delegation referred to 7.1 on our agenda, and we now have a revised agenda, so he would have been referring to 8.1 that's on our agenda now, just for clarification. The next delegation is Alana Hart. who has 5 minutes. Alana, would you want to come to the podium, please? Who is representing the Central Ontario Cooperative Housing Corporation.
Good afternoon, all. Thank you so much for allowing me this time to speak to you. I am here on behalf of Central Ontario Cooperative Housing Federation. I'm the executive director. COCHF serves 25 co-op housing organizations here in Waterloo, as well as one student housing organization, representing roughly 2,528 units/beds, depending on which organization you're speaking of. Many of those co-ops are HSA co-ops that are being affected, of course, by end of mortgage. Part of what is happening for them is as those mortgages come to an end, that the reimbursement for these taxes will end as well, which puts them at a disadvantage both in being able to provide affordable housing, continuing to look at that, maintaining the housing stock, and looking at any type of expansion. Oh, I should have said, next slide, please. Sorry, this is the first time I'm doing this, so. Next slide. Great, thank you so much. So this is going to have a unique impact on this part of the sector of affordable housing. And I come here in support because I'm hopeful that there'll be a way to provide this tax exemption so that they will continue to be able to provide this type of service, which is so critical at this time, particularly when we're dealing with this type of housing crisis. How much, I don't see a timer, so I'm just gonna keep talking. Fantastic. So the last thing I wanted to say, of course, is that I'm grateful to be here and that we, sincerely speaking on behalf of the sector, is grateful to the Regional Municipality of Waterloo for their continued focus and dedication towards the maintenance and expansion of affordable, cooperative, and nonprofit housing.
You can talk longer if you want.
I'm not sure I have all that much more to say, so.
And I think we received communication this morning from your provincial organization as well, if I'm not mistaken. Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Just trying to understand all the different housing options here. How is your co-op different from our previous presenter from Union Co-op, or is it?
So it is a different model, although both are cooperative, and of course, we work with, and when it comes to items like this, we work with Union Co-op and trying to move these items forward. Cooperative housing has been around for a long time. Most of these co-ops have been built about 30 years ago, and it's strictly affordable housing. The market segment of that affordable housing is way below market. So most of we don't call them tenants, we call them members. And those members are able to explore some very deep subsidy when necessary, with support, of course. The other thing that makes us radically different, or very different from other models, is that we're based on community. So our entire model states that there are members that are in charge of the destiny or have a voice when it comes to decisions that are being made by the organization. That's also different than if you have tenants and their rent, we call them members, and they pay housing charge. And they really are in charge of what happens in the communities themselves.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks for coming in today. Really appreciate the work that you do locally and also with the provincial organization. I think co-ops are just a really, co-ops in general are a really fantastic model, but certainly for the housing, and especially the one in Waterloo that's run by the students, for the students. I mean, it's the biggest co-op, I think, in Canada, and it's so well run and a great place for the students who live there. But I'm just curious if you could kind of, it feels like you said a lot of these co-ops are about 30 years old. What happened in the intervening years? And I mean, co-ops seem to kind of fall out of favor, but my understanding is now they're like you have access to federal funding again and things like that. But there's been a real dip and sort of, I mean, it almost feels like they were a forgotten housing entity. But do you feel like you're back now and you're more vibrant and ready to build again? I was always really curious about kind of what happened to co-ops.
So most of the co-ops were built under a funding model. When that funding was no longer available, there was no more room or there was no more opportunity for co-ops to continue to expand that part of the sector. What's happening now, we hope soon, that the federal government has promised in the budget, 2022 budget, that they would allocate $1.5 billion to the expansion, mostly development, of new cooperatives. So if you feel that there is a renewed interest in cooperatives, because of that alone, it's because we're looking at opportunity, but also because at this time in this climate, so many people are looking for housing, and this is a viable model. So that we're able to provide it, would we have opportunity to expand further? Both development and acquisition are on the table at this point for all the cooperatives in Waterloo Region. We just keep talking about it to try to find ways to be able to fund that.
Okay. And is that matched by is the federal interest in funding matched by the province?
The province is different.
Councillor Hunak.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the excellent delegation. You were short and sweet, and you did great.
Thank you.
Any other questions of council? Thanks, Alana, for appearing.
Thank you so much.
We had another person, Jackie Wells from Acorn, register as a delegate last minute for 3 minutes. Are you online, Jackie? Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. You have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Regional Council, for allowing me to delegate. I'm speaking on behalf of Waterloo Region Acorn. Acorn Canada is 177,000 members strong across the country. We are comprised of low to moderate income families working on issues of social and economic justice. Like any union or association, our membership decides the drives of the organization while determining that the vast majority of our resources go towards organizing door to door, block to block, and city to city. We've been organizing in Canada for nearly 20 years, and consistently the #1 issue that comes up when we speak with residents at their door is housing. We commend the region for taking the time to review different options to preserve affordable housing and protect tenants from displacement. Right now, Ontario is losing affordable housing too fast. The province's current focus is to build new rental supply. However, this new supply is largely going into luxury, expensive housing with no rent control on new developments. There is very little attention being paid to protect existing affordable housing, which is the most at risk. Rent evictions are becoming all too common, as it is an easy way for landlords to increase their profits with little to no repercussions. With these predatory landlord tactics becoming more and more common, low-income tenants are left with nowhere to turn. Policies like rent eviction bylaws, landlord licensing, and rental housing acquisitions funds are vital for preserving the affordable housing we already have and creating the affordable housing that Waterloo Region urgently needs. Waterloo Region Acorn is currently working with tenants in several buildings across the region, as you've heard a little bit about already today, that are experiencing no-fault evictions. Tenants are terrified. They don't know where they will move. They are scared that they won't be able to find an affordable place and that they are being left behind. And unfortunately, that is likely the case. The vacancy rate of affordable housing on the private market for below $1,000 a month is currently 0%. The compensation landlords must provide tenants for rent evicting or dem evicting a building is not enough to cover the first and last month's rent at current market prices, let alone the years of higher rent the tenant will be paying in the future. Working on the committee to support the Homes for All motion. The combination of rent eviction bylaws, rental replacement bylaws, and acquisition fund policies would protect low-income tenants, ensuring they are able to continue having a place to live that they can actually afford and maintain their current quality of life, and would preserve existing affordable housing in the private market, facilitating the transition of private market rentals into long-term affordable housing through acquisition. We need bold, clear action from Council to take action on the housing crisis and put a stop to the predatory landlord practices that unhouse our community members every single day.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Jackie? There are none. Thanks, Jackie, and to all the other delegations for your presentation. We're going to move on now to the other part of our agenda, which I don't think is going to take very long, and then we'll get into the specifics of the reports that you're here for. So the next item on the agenda, item number 6, is the consent agenda, and if you wish to To council members, if you wish to remove an item from the consent agenda, please indicate so now, as we'll not take any questions on consent items unless they are requested to be removed to the regular agenda. The item listed on the consent agenda will be dealt with in one motion. Is there any items that you wish to have dealt with separately? Councillor Shantz is first, and then Councillor Salonen.
Thank you. Just a quick I think it's a quick question anyway. So the money that we're receiving, will that go into the plan to end chronic homelessness, or is this allocated differently from that?
It's allocated differently. This is essentially funding that we didn't expect and therefore didn't budget for very specific expenses related, I will say, to winter supports from January 1st to March 31st. So it will go back and cover those expenses that we've already allocated up until the end of March 31st. And then the plan to end chronic homelessness will continue on after that. So they're not going to offset, if that's the essence of your question.
But it's covering some costs that we're incurring in the housing.
Correct.
Will that play into the plan to end chronic homelessness when that report comes? Or like, will this help our plan to end chronic homelessness?
Yes, it will. It will help us move the rest of the work this year going forward and into next fiscal year. Yes.
Councillor Salonen?
That was essentially my question as well, so I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a mover or seconder for the items on the consent agenda? Moved by Councillor Vanovic, seconded by Councillor Nowak. Please use your e-scribe buttons to indicate your support. Okay, that is carried. Thank you. We are on to item number 7, a staff presentation. Just as a reminder, this staff presentation is for information only, and it's in preparation to prepare context for the 3 recommendations on housing that we're going to be dealing with later. So we would ask that you hold any questions on this report until we get into the specific items on the agenda that we're dealing with, which is 8.1, 8.12, and 8.13. I'm going to ask Commissioner Sweeney to introduce it, and then Mr. Petitpierre and Mr. Chandy will give the presentation.
Thank you through you, Chair. Just to keep us rolling along, I just want to thank my colleagues Ryan and Matthew, who are going to, as Councillor Erb mentioned, give an overview of the complexity of the reports that are coming forward today. So Ryan, I believe you're leading the way.
I am. Thanks, Peter. Good afternoon, regional councillors, Chair Erb. I'm excited to be here along with my colleague Matthew Chandy to present on a number of policy initiatives and directions for your consideration and discussion today, all under the strategic plan objective of Homes for All in this community. We heard loud and clear from this community that Homes for All is and should be our priority. And as a staff group, we find this to be an inspiring and ambitious pillar of our strategic plan. So what we have on today's agenda and are what we hope you will find to be equally inspired and ambitious policy directions proposed to help us achieve that goal. Some of these will be for information, some for further exploration and collaboration, and one for approval as a complete program for implementation. Next slide, please. So the purpose of our time this afternoon is to provide an overview of these 3 specific reports related to advancing the work of our Homes for All strategic priority. The first one, accelerating housing on municipal and partner lands, you'll be receiving for information. The second, affordable housing policy and program incentives, that's coming forward for approval to explore, do some more work, and come back should it be supported. It also further outlines the roles and responsibilities for us as a regional government when it comes to these policy incentives, and as well as for our partners at the area municipalities. The third and final report for consideration on this afternoon's agenda in this package is for property tax exemption for affordable housing. That is for your approval for implementation later this year. Next slide, please. I don't need to say this or tell you this, but I'm going to anyway, because you all live and work in the same place that I do. We have been in and continue to be in an affordable housing crisis. The additional challenges of the last few years have also not been kind in helping us work our way out of it. In fact, they've exacerbated the challenge that we all live and work within. Particularly when it comes to affordable housing, that issue has been compounded by the macro factors you see on the slide ahead of you. Increased inflation, cost of living increases, and the continued growth of our region on the path to 1 million residents region-wide. Next slide, please. This environment, this challenging environment that we find ourselves in didn't happen overnight. It's been decades in the making, largely through successive national and provincial policy decisions over that period that have led us to the current housing and homelessness crisis. However, there are a variety of tools available for consideration and implementation brought forward today that represent what we can do as regional and area municipalities to begin to undo the damage wrought by those decisions. On the screen are the broad categories of tools that are available to regional and area municipal government. Acquisition through the purchase of properties, lands through the provision of surplus lands for development, policy through incentives to encourage development and retention of affordable housing supply, further policies through protections to ensure the retention of rental housing, taxation through the control over property taxes, and finally, collaboration with local municipalities, with industry, and with community. And we recognize that this is particularly important with our area municipal colleagues who are doing great work. And the way that we have thought about and framed our role with each of the initiatives put forward today is from the perspective of how we as a regional government can further support, enhance, and amplify that work. Next slide, please. So this afternoon, we are presenting these 3 reports as a strategic package under the pillar of Homes for All in our strategic plan. Our community, our staff, you as a council have told us that achieving Homes for All is a priority of the work that we do and continue to move forward as a corporation. And the reports and recommendations in front of you are a direct response to that. They represent a variety of the options, opportunities, and directions we can explore and implement to contribute to achieving that ambitious strategic objective. Next slide, please. Accordingly, the Homes for All priority section of our strategic plan is comprised of 4 main initiatives that leverage the tools at our disposal. Today, we are bringing 3 reports forward that speak to creating and preserving affordable housing and unlocking lands. And for that latter part, for that purpose specifically, I'll hand the presentation over to my colleague, Mr. Chandy, to speak to the Accelerating Affordable Housing on Municipal and Partner Lands report. Matthew.
Thank you, Ryan. And through the chair, thank you very much. Next slide, please. In December 2023, Council directed staff to work with community partners, home builders, and area municipalities on affordable and attainable housing solutions on publicly owned land and bring back a joint action plan to Council in March. Next slide, please. Staff have been working in 4 priority areas to address this request. And we would like to provide an overview of those 5 areas for you. Next slide, please. So the first is a rapid housing municipal advisory committee. This committee, established by the region and area municipal CAOs, is meant to look at ways to collaborate more on the acceleration of development on municipally owned lands. This committee is still in development. We are currently in the process of finalizing terms of reference, which should be hopefully completed in the next 2 weeks. But this committee will work together on various initiatives that will focus on things like streamlining procurement processes, responding to requests from land and development consortiums, and not-for-profits looking for land to support community uses. This group will also help to coordinate responses and applications to senior levels of government, such as the recent Housing Accelerator funds and the coordination work that is required amongst all the municipalities on applications such as that. And we'll also look at other opportunities to streamline development approvals processes and coordinate various initiatives to make development happen faster on municipal lands. The second area that's currently being focused on is the current inventory of municipally owned lands and how we build that inventory of lands. As we know, the existing amount of available regional lands for development are limited at this time. So we are absolutely looking at our existing stock and how we can approach that differently. Case in point, if we think of opportunities such as 651 Concession Street, where we have brought that to council and there's development analysis currently underway on that property. But properties like that offer an opportunity to look at delivering regional services and also leveraging that land at the same time for affordable housing opportunities. So those opportunities are currently different. We're currently taking approaches like that to the land that we'll have in our, that currently exist in our current stock of lands, and if future lands come online, what those opportunities might be. We're also looking at our own procurement processes here. After talking with the development industry and receiving feedback on previous requests for proposals that we have issued for development, we've received feedback from the development community, and we're constantly having discussions on how we can make that process easier, attract more development partners, and gain more interest from the community on opportunities to increase interest in bidding on those sites and those development opportunities, and also looking at ways to make the whole process less cumbersome and more flexible for those who are going through that bidding process. We're also receiving, next slide please. We are also receiving an increased amount of inquiries from community partners, specifically the non-traditional housing developers. So think of groups like churches. We continuously and are seeing an increased amount of requests for assistance in looking at how, looking to support those organizations go through the process of converting or transforming their lands or leveraging their lands in some way to support community uses, with affordable housing being at the top of the list. Fortunately, we do have, council did approve a staff contingent, part of which in December, part of which is able to help with some of that development readiness and analysis, which we'll be able to work and leverage for the purposes of assisting these non-traditional housing developers build more affordable housing. And then we are continuously having conversations, as I mentioned before, with the development industry on opportunities to collaborate and work together differently. And that does include groups like the Build Now Consortium, who have we've been in conversations with, along with the area municipalities, about opportunities to accelerate both affordable and attainable housing throughout the region. This does include looking at different solutions for those groups, such as considering smaller size parcels of land to try and advance those types of proposals that come to the municipalities. So at this point in time, we have a series of, we have these 5 priority areas, and we are planning throughout the year to report back to council on the status of all 5 of these areas. And we are also planning to come back with some specific requests and plans after some more analysis is done in areas like building the land portfolio, strategic acquisition opportunities, and how we can work differently through our procurement processes. I will turn it back over to Ryan.
Thanks, Matthew. And next slide, please. So the final two reports on this section of your agenda. First one, affordable housing policy and program incentives. Again, want to highlight that this report is coming to you presented as opportunities to do more work, more exploration, more collaboration before coming back for any kind of a program implementation decision. I'd also like you to think of the incentives on this report as Chapter 1. Given the complexity and technicality of the items in this report and the recommendations, we wanted to allow the proper space for consideration, discussion, and questions on them today. I do want to leave you with, though, that we have no shortage of additional innovative, leading-edge ideas and directions we can further pursue, and pending the outcome of today's discussion and directions, we can come back later this year to consider further policy directions and incentives for your consideration. The third and final reports on the agenda for the presentation today is the property tax exemption report. This one is coming to you as a fully created and designed program that we are asking for your consideration for implementation to preserve and increase our stock of affordable housing beginning this year. Next slide, please. So earlier in the presentation, I spoke about being in an affordable housing crisis. And part of what is contributing to that state is the erosion or loss of existing affordable housing, either through private landlords or through the expiration of existing agreements. Now, we've demonstrated a great deal of success in our ability to facilitate the creation of new affordable housing through our Building Better Futures initiative. However, this development of new stock is unable to keep up with the growing rise in the need for affordable housing, as the private market is losing existing affordable housing at a faster rate than we are able to build it. Unless that loss of affordable housing is addressed, the stock will not be expanded through new development alone. Policy incentives that we can enable and enact at the regional and area municipal levels for affordable housing then become crucial for both increasing and preserving that stock. They are powerful policy tools that can stop the erosion of existing affordable housing assets and contribute to creating additional affordable housing to begin to pave the way for the path out of the current housing and homelessness crisis that we all live and work within. Next slide, please. So, the Affordable Housing Policy and Programs Incentives Report. If you can think of this report in three sections. The first section would detail initiatives that the region could lead and implement. The second section would be incentives that we would play a support or coordination role in partnership with the area municipalities, because those are the incentives that and policies that would be in their purview for implementation. And the third section of the report is around sustained and continued advocacy efforts to the provincial and federal governments to support all of this. So in that first section on region-led initiatives, these are things like considering a multi-unit residential acquisition program, a right of first refusal policy, and an overall regional needs assessment. All recommended for further work and exploration, but if directed to continue to explore, these are three pieces of a puzzle that can mitigate affordable housing loss. An acquisition program is a program that, if implemented, would support the acquisition of privately owned properties and ensure that they remain affordable. A right of first refusal policy could support an acquisition program like that in supporting the ability to purchase a property at the same price as it would achieve on the market. While an overall regional needs assessment would provide at a neighborhood level the type of analysis to inform where and how policies like these can most effectively be applied. The second section on rental housing protections. Again, this is where the region would play more of a support role in working with our partners at the area municipalities to support an implementation. And these would be policies that support tenant protections around renovations, around unit conversions, and demolitions. And again, the final and third section of this report is around sustained and continued advocacy efforts to the province and federal government to support all of this work. The final report on today's presentation is the property tax. Again, this one is coming to you as a standalone report, given the background work done to date and the value that we perceive of the program in achieving affordable housing preservation and creation on its own. In this report, we are recommending the implementation of a property tax exemption of the regional and educational portions of the property tax for the purposes of preservation and creation of affordable housing. The steps outlined in the report indicate the order of operations that would be required, including updating our existing bylaw to enable this to happen, the intake of applications through the spring and summer, and a subsequent report for eligible properties and the financial impacts coming back in the fall of this year. Through that time period and beyond, we also want to continue to undertake further work with the area municipalities to coordinate, to collaborate, wherever and whenever they be interested in doing so. Next slide, please. And final slide. Overall, as I said off the top, we're excited to have the opportunity to discuss these initiatives. We feel that they are a mix of bold and new policy directions that this region can make to have significant and generational impact on this community. We do recognize that they are bold, ambitious, and new directions for you to consider. But we do believe that they are also exactly the type of directions that will achieve an equally bold, ambitious, strategic objective of homes for all in the region of Waterloo. At a staff level, this is exciting work, and we're prepared to take it on through the course of this year. Thanks for listening to our presentation. I hope it's been helpful. We'll turn the process back to you now, Mr. Chair, to consider the reports in the order that they are on the agenda, and we'll stay close by in case there happen to be any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sweeney?
There might be a few questions. I just want to take an opportunity to thank Ryan and Matthew and a number of the staff that are in attendance here and all the folks that have put a lot of work into bringing this forward. And to reiterate the point that, as you all know, next month we're bringing forward the community-based plan to end chronic homelessness. And today we're talking about one side of the equation, so to speak, and next month we're going to talk about the other and how intricately they are linked together. So we are looking forward to your feedback and comments and questions today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the presentation, and you can stay there. And so just for the reconfirm with council, what I'm going to try and do as chair is that we would deal with each one of the reports, 8.1, 8.12, and 8.13 separately, that we can deal with each one with questions and answers from staff and council members individually, vote on each one individually in the order that they appear on the agenda. And for 8.1, there are three sections to the recommendation that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo explore the multi-unit tenant acquisition program. The second one, directing staff to looking at renovations and conversions with area municipalities. And the third part of that is related to advocacy with the government. And I'd like to deal with each one of those separately in that motion, just for simplicity for questions and moving on, if that's council's agrees with that. So on to questions. Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you, Chair Erb. First, I want to say thank you to you and Commissioner Sweeney and Ryan for providing me with an opportunity the other day to ask some questions. I really appreciated that time to get some clarity. I just want to say right off that I fully support 8.13, which is the property tax exemption. That's something that's been floating around for a while now. I know it was a request of Union prior to this.
So if I may interrupt just for a second, Councillor Deutschman, so you're talking about a different...
I'll be back to that other. The whole presentation was on all three things, so they covered all three areas. So
yeah, but,
I'll get to the question on the first part.
Okay, so not too much editorializing.
I have 5 minutes to ask my question, so I'll ask my question and I'll get to it. Thank you. Okay. So I'm pleased that that's come forward and look forward to that. But I just wanted to get some clarity on the issue of acquisition. Because within report 8.11 or 24-003, on the first page, it talks about directing staff to explore the creation of a multi-unit rental acquisition program to preserve existing affordable housing. But as I go through that report at page 3, it talks about the region of Waterloo can play a role in mitigating the loss of existing housing affordability in 3 ways. And again, it talks about creation of the MURA, or whatever you're going to call it, I know everything's an acronym, program, to fund not-for-profits, cooperatives, et cetera, to do all that. So I'm just confused because I can personally tell you I do not support the region purchasing, but I just need clarity though. Is this a program that we're looking at to consider to assist these organizations, or is this something that you may come back and say the region should be acquiring these affordable units? So I just need clarification on that.
Yes, Councillor Deutschman, thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, you're correct that in the report, we identified some of what we think are the best practices in operating a program like this. And this would be through supporting the types of organizations listed in the report, not-for-profits, co-ops, Indigenous land trusts, et cetera. When we crafted the recommendation, though, we didn't want to presuppose an outcome of a program that would come back before doing additional collaboration and consultation in its overall design. I think it's fair to say, though, that in terms of best practices, an acquisition program that would suit in this region when we look elsewhere in the country and in the world is set up to support and facilitate exactly those types of organizations, and it wouldn't be the municipality or regional level of government that would be doing the acquisition solely on its own.
The other aspect is this right of first refusal. I do have a concern about municipalities instituting a right of first refusal. You know, I appreciate all the work that's done to assist with respect to homelessness, et cetera, but I just have there seems to be, for me, a line in the sand, perhaps, to say how much do we interfere in the marketplace when we start to implement these sorts of concepts. And I see you referenced Montreal with respect to that. And definitely, you know, something like that obviously would have to be a collaborative decision amongst all the area municipalities in the region of Waterloo in order to institute that sort of concept. But is there someplace other than Montreal that has instituted a right of first refusal policy?
Mr. Petitpierre.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. I can't think of another example at the moment. The example that we most closely looked at was Montreal, and you're correct that it would have to be done in very close collaboration and implementation with the area municipalities, but also with the level of the province. Right now, the legislation, the way that it's crafted in Ontario, we wouldn't be able to take this on and implement it. It would have to be done and enabled through the province of Ontario. So the way that the recommendation is worded is that we do some of the exploration and continue to advocate to the province to enable different tools and incentives and policy directions that we can implement in this region.
Okay, I'm happy to hear that. Thank you.
Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you very much. And my first question is to Mr. Sweeney. The overall report is very wide spread in terms of all the things that it wants to do, and I think you've described it through your staff as bold, ambitious, and all-encompassing. And when I look at it, and I'm just wondering, my first question is, Mr. Sweeney, you might like this one, is do you have enough staff to do this if we implement all of these different things?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Craig. I think what's really important here is that I'll reiterate what Ryan said, particularly on the incentives report that we're talking about right now. This is really looking for council's support, direction, feedback for us to go and explore a whole bunch of policy mechanisms and tools and options that we would then bring back more fully baked that would then have implications in terms of what resources we might need to further that along. So the work right now in exploring this, yes, we would accomplish that through our existing staff team. We have staff that are well-versed in a lot of this work. It's really about putting pen to paper and bringing forward those options that Ryan alluded to in terms of what you have at your disposal. The actual implementation of some or all of these will then take further conversation, and these won't, as Ryan said, we didn't get here overnight. We're not getting out of this overnight. But these requests right now are not coming with additional resource asks. We just want to work up to understand what they might look like, and at that time, we would bring forward any asks if needed to do that.
Okay, and I appreciate that. And the second question is, I think quite clearly the staff have indicated the province and the federal government are responsible for the situation we're in. My question is, if in fact we adopt all of this, these different resolutions, and we move positively in the future, what are the possible outcomes in 3 years, 5 years, if we're losing the affordable housing race right now? What do you perceive in 3 years? That we'll be above water, or still treading water, or moving ahead of this? I'm making it easy for you today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm hoping that we're in a canoe with enough paddles and we know the direction of the current and we're avoiding rocks all the way through. Obviously, I'm being a little bit facetious, but you know, we know that on a national level, at the last time there was data collection, that for every unit of affordable housing that was built in Canada, we lost 11. We don't actually have, to my knowledge, a local number. I think it would be incumbent upon us to understand what that looks like and then move the needle forward, as you heard both from staff and from a number of the delegates here. But challenge accepted in terms of actually putting a marker out to understand, to articulate what success looks like. That would come when we have a good direction in terms of what tools we're going to, we have your support and direction to implement. Does that answer your question?
No, you've answered both questions quite clearly, and I appreciate it all, especially the efforts that have gone into this report. Thank you.
Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. And my thanks to Mr. Sweeney, Mr. Petitpierre, and your whole team. This is a really tough call. We've declared a housing crisis, a housing emergency. We just came off of a healthcare emergency, and now we're jumping into this. And so I really appreciated your emphasis on collaboration, because I sang the praises of Waterloo Region and how we collaborated in the COVID crisis. And I think if we're going to be successful in that housing crisis, we need to have that same level of collaboration and working together. So I don't really have a question on this one. I'll have a question later on, but I appreciate that this is coming forward and that part of it is working with the area municipalities on how to move forward. So thank you.
Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Just a comment, I was at the conference with Chair Redmond, and Chair Redmond told me that the province provided housing, or not the province, the federal government, for quite a while, and they dropped off to nothing, and it was affordable housing. And maybe Chair Redmond can answer this, or Mr. Sweeney also, and how we got into part of this mess was because the government of upper level stopped producing and stopped providing affordable housing.
Okay, that's sort of not part of the recommendations here, but if you want to try and answer it, Mr. Sweeney.
Councillor Foxton, you're correct. In the 70s and 80s, if my memory serves from a presentation I saw, the federal government was building upwards of 10 to 20,000 units of affordable housing every year, and that literally dropped off. And so a number of those actual physical units still exist, obviously, and as we've heard from a couple of delegates, some are in the hands of nonprofits and co-ops. Some are in the hands of Waterloo Regional Housing. And again, it's incumbent upon us to not only build what's shiny and new and needed, but also protect what's already here.
Councilor Vanek.
Thank you very much, and thank you to staff for all of the work that's been done in preparing these three reports. There's a lot of very good thought leadership that has certainly gone into them. I will try to focus my questions and then later my comments on this first report, Mr. Chair. And I'm looking at first of all, the multi-unit rental acquisition program. This is certainly one that I think merits consideration. Area municipalities should definitely be part of that work. Have we looked at things like Toronto's Mura program as an example of a playbook that actually we could emulate as opposed to having to necessarily reinvent the wheel?
Mr. Pettier.
Yep, thank you for the question, Councillor, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's exactly the program that we've looked at most closely as a multi-unit residential acquisition program. We've also looked at the best practices put out by the Housing Assessment Resource Tool, which is a think tank group out of University of British Columbia, supported by the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, that outlines best practices that would support a multi-unit residential acquisition program of this nature in the region. So that's what we would use as the basis for our starting point to talk about, to consult, and to collaborate on a program fit for Waterloo region.
Great, thank you. On the issue of a right of first refusal policy, seems an interesting concept, but I'm just wondering, have we looked to see whether in fact the legislative framework exists from a legal perspective for us to be doing this? Because I understand there may be some questions around that. I don't know if that's a question maybe for Mr. Walsh.
Mr. Walsh, you want to respond to that, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So my understanding, this would be a provincial initiative. We'd have to work with the province on that. They hold the jurisdiction. They have the power, if you will, in that regard. And I think the discussion around this type of program was based on a Quebec plan where the provincial government there did take the lead and allowed for some of these incentives in places like Montreal.
Right, which was the Montreal example executed. And of course, they operate under a different municipal act and different legislation overall in general. I'm just wondering, as we look at all of this, how much meaningful engagement has there been thus far with area municipalities around any of this? Because there are a couple ideas in here, such as the housing needs assessment, the rental replacement bylaw, and so on, that are already bodies of work that are being done by area municipalities. So, for example, I'm not sure why as a region we would need to do a needs assessment because, for example, all of the municipalities, anybody who's getting half funding as an example, has an obligation to do that as part of our contractual arrangement with the federal government. So that's a body of work that's already underway in the city of Kitchener. I imagine it's underway in the city of Waterloo as they have had their funding announced so far. Not sure about others. And then on the rental replacement bylaw, I know this is also a piece of work that we actually started in 2023 that our council directed staff to begin working on. We've launched a Renting in Kitchener website with resources and so on. We're doing an online eviction survey right now and have been monitoring Hamilton's work in this space. And so I'm just trying to understand, how we're coming to terms with it so that we're not, there's lots of work to be done here and there's no point in duplicating work that's already started.
Mr. Petitpierre.
Yeah, thank you again for the question, and through you, Mr. Chair. We'd be in the early days of any of these conversations on specific initiatives with the area municipalities. The way that we've written the recommendations would be, one, if supported by regional council, then we'd really start into that collaboration and engagement work on all of these. And as I said up the top in my presentation, we really see our role as supporting where they're in the area municipality purview for implementation. How can we help as regional staff and regional levels of government to amplify and accelerate the great work that's already underway at area municipalities. And at this point in time, looking for the direction and support of council to head off down these paths if you think that they are ideas and concepts that are interesting and worth our resources in exploring.
So specifically on the issue of the housing needs assessment, I mean, that is something that's needing to be done by, I presume, several of our area municipalities. So does it make sense for the region to be doing their own, or should, in fact, you know, we'll happily share our data and information with you, as the region does sometimes with us in certain areas. So would that not make more sense?
Thank you. And sorry, I forgot that part of your question in my response. Yes, that would make tremendous sense. We know that many of the area municipalities are already undertaking this work, those that have been successful through the Housing Accelerator Fund in particular. We also know that not everybody is currently undertaking them too. We think that by combining them or by helping and supporting a regional needs assessment, it paints the full picture of the needs across this region when it comes to housing affordability. And that would inform and help us in implementing policy decisions and directions as are referenced in this report, as well as help us make other program and policy decisions at a more informed regional level. So the work being undertaken at a City of Kitchener level, for example, is a piece of that regional puzzle, and we would love to work with the city and every other area municipality to combine that information to support or take on some of the work where we can too, to put the pieces of the puzzle together and have a full regional assessment of need across this region for information.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. My time's up. I'll cue in again because I do have a couple more questions.
Thank you. Councillor Hune.
Is a huge part of that, and I think the multifaceted approach is the way to accomplish it, and I look forward to supporting each and every piece of the work here. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Again, echoing what Councillor Hunick most recently said, but what other councillors have said about the report. I was impressed by the depth and breadth of the work that has been done, because you're also doing it in tandem with the plan to end homelessness. So thank you for that. And one of the first things that kind of came to my mind as I read through the various reports was that you know, the idea that, like, this is multi-level. You know, there's province, there's feds, there's region, there's local municipalities. We all want to play our part. We all want to contribute and address the needs that are clearly out there. But I think we can do that, and particularly with a plan that you're coming forward with this, I think it's possible to do that. But it really, to a great degree, it's incumbent on us to kind of set aside who's going to get credit and for some of this stuff, and just really think about how are we going to do this work so that we best serve our residents. So just a bit of editorializing there, but I do want to, I mean, it is, as Councillor Urbanovic said, it is in a two-tier municipal structure that we're in. It is important to have clarity about who does what, so that will be important going forward, so that, you know, we're not duplicating efforts, but there really is some clarity about who does what and how we can best support each other. One of the things that I was disappointed with is that there wasn't any reference to sustainability in this. I'm going to be hopeful, as I am, to say that, you know, that's just sort of with the strategic plan, that this is embedded in the direction and the work that staff are going to undertake. But I don't like to leave those kind of things to chance. I mean, we know that every new building that we creates GHGs. And so I really do believe that going forward, we really need to have information included in reports about what the sustainability aspects of these are, including, like, where the transit stops, where the, you know, active transportation, you know, are there going to be complete communities so that, you know, people can, you know, easily access by walking or rolling, you know, the, you know, basic things that they need, you know, so are there going to be some retail options around where some of these housing units that we're going to build are, et cetera, stuff like that. You know, are we going to work with Innova and their Grand River Energy subsidiary around, you know, solar and geothermal and thermal utilities and things like that as we build and retrofit these, and heat pumps, et cetera, as we build and retrofit these units that we that we either want to obtain or that we're going to create. So I just would like to see a lot more of that going forward. There's not really a question there, I guess, but so I guess the question is this embedded in your thinking, or can this be brought forward in further reports?
Give an answer.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. Thank you for the reminder, and I've got it front and center now as we go through this collaborative exercise and exploring what policy implementations in this regard would look like. It's an important reminder that we build that into any program that we design moving forward as some way to impress upon the community the importance of this. So thank you.
Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Again, to you and the entire staff, thank you for this report. Between the delegates and yourselves, you've shown the extreme need for affordable housing, the urgency that we require it, and collaboration is all through your report, collaboration with the region and the municipalities. I might point out to Councillor McCabe that an existing building, which we would be buying and acquiring, is sustainable as a green building. And I know coming from Cambridge, we have many older, affordable buildings that are at risk right now. So the urgency is there. And I think almost weekly I get the email about fear of rent eviction. People are feeling threatened. Even if they haven't heard from their landlord, they know that they can't afford to move out, and they need some reassurance. So as many of these programs that we can put in place, as the better it is, because as you've pointed out, this didn't happen overnight and it won't be solved overnight. But we do need to begin, and we need to begin yesterday. So I'm hoping that your report is passed unanimously by this council.
Councillor James.
Thank you, through you, Chair Erb. I do also want to thank staff for the work that went into this and the engagement with providing this information to us today and putting these options forward. There's a couple of things that I'm very conscious of as we move forward, and I do support this report and in its entirety, but I am conscious of, as we go through and some of the community engagement, we've seen some of that the past few days, and it helps in the reflection and understanding where people are really needing support. From those who wrote in from the community in support of this, I think that speaks volumes, and this will help carry forward the plan to end as we continue on throughout the next few years. The couple of things that I am conscious of, and while we acquire housing and look at property tax exemptions, I'm really conscious of the prevention and ensuring that is fitting into this as we move forward. Not for the conversation for today, but again, in conversations I have with community, the prevention piece is so very, very important. And that I did appreciate was the mention throughout this report around the collaboration needed with the area municipalities, because I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. If there are opportunities, I think we should leverage those. And I did appreciate that when I read through this. It was stated multiple times to collaborate with the area municipalities. So thank you for the work that's gone into this.
Okay, we're at round two. Councillor Deutschmann.
Thank you, Chair Erb. Yeah, I just want to reiterate the collaboration aspect. I think there is a significant issue with respect to collaboration between the region and the area municipalities. We hear this issue coming up quite often at the Horseshoe here. And that was one of the issues that was deep concern for me with respect to this report was how far are we intruding in areas of responsibility that are at the area municipality level. And so I think that is vitally important, because when you talk about, for example, at page 3 again, work with area municipalities to explore the creation of right of first refusal policies, which includes the identification of affordable at-risk buildings and/or neighborhoods informed by a Waterloo Region housing needs assessment. Okay, that is the issue that I have a bit of a concern is the region and working with the area municipalities. I appreciate that it's saying Waterloo Region, but it's very important that we're working collaboratively on these issues, because the area municipalities are responsible for all these buildings and all this land. The region is like an overlay to all of that. And so we have to be very respectful of what's going on in the area municipality areas. But I just want to ask this, though. Mr. Chandy's up there, so I want to ask about Build Now. It was brought up. In conversations that I've had, for example, with Mr. Mills, they're interested in any piece of property. 2 acres, 3 acres, I know they have a desire, like every acre is 50 units, and I know they have the 10,000 units option. So what is happening to try and find something for Build Now?
Mr. Chandy.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So yes, we are. We recently met with Build Now to talk about just that. In fact, I think I referenced it in my presentation, and that is the need for them to consider the smaller parcels of land as part of maybe a revised proposal or structure to achieve their goal. We also talked about having to go through a procurement process as well to, through the disposition of lands if we get to that stage to bring on development partners. We have had a couple follow-up conversations and will continue to do so, more so to look at that in more detail. So I believe we have an upcoming meeting scheduled with the Build Now team specifically to look at what that proposal looks like using smaller parcels of land. Again, as I also referenced in my presentation, that the region is extremely limited on existing available parcels of land in our inventory. So trying to be realistic with that and communicate that to the Build Now group. But we are having, as I said, a bit of a workshop discussion with them in the next week or two to kind of work through and have discussions around a revised model using smaller parcels and what that could look like. And I should also say, too, that I believe that all of the area municipalities are having a similar joint conversation with Build Now in the next 2 weeks as well to, again, I think reflect on what are the opportunities using smaller parcels of land when it becomes more realistic to look at bringing on development partners for that rather than a 50 or 100 acre parcel of land, which just does not exist.
I understand that, and they understand that too. So you obviously are all moving in the right direction then with respect to this. I just had a question then on this. You mentioned the RFP process then. Is that a municipal act requirement that in order to do anything with any land that we might be able to provide to this project that it has to go through an RFP process?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So as far as the disposition or distribution of municipal lands, I believe that would be a specific bylaw to the region that dictates how we're going to go about selling property that we have. We would follow and set out our own process in that regard. I think the municipal act would have some general guidance in respect to being fair and transparent, as always, but we would set our own policy in that respect.
So, Mr. Chan, can you explain then why we would be using an RFP process versus just saying, here's 5 acres we have, go build now?
Well, so I did also say we are looking at our overall procurement process and streamlining our whole procurement process. So that will be one of the things that we look at. What is the best way of disposing of land? At the same time, we're talking. You're asking about Build Now. We also have a number of other developers, development partners that are interested in developing on regional land. So thinking about, we do need to think about how we're fair and transparent and how we find development partners to come and develop on lands. So all of that is being taken into the whole review of our procurement process for the purposes of building on municipal lands.
So that's something we'll have an opportunity to comment on or participate in soon?
Sorry. Yes, we will bring back.
Okay, thank you.
The results of those discussions and research to council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just had a kind of random thought. Because mostly I've been thinking about it because there's a couple houses in my neighborhood that have just been empty, like completely empty and abandoned for about 8 to 10 years. Have empty units or empty properties been looked at, like to consider to, be partnered with either developers in like lower level multi-unit residences if it's zoned correctly? Like, has that been part of the discussion?
Through the chair, I think one of the things we are trying to do is look at strategic acquisition opportunities if they exist. And really that is always really trying to see, can the property maximize affordable housing opportunities and units that we create. So I would say that we are also always looking for those types of parcels of land and seeing if they're feasible and offer those opportunities. And I think our real estate team does that on an ongoing basis. So I'm not going to comment on any specific parcel of land at this time, but I think we're always kind of trying to approach, land development for affordable housing with that perspective.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Faulkner?
Just trying to check where we are. I just have a question for 8.1.3. Are we not there yet, right?
Correct.
I'll try again later.
Good. Councillor Van Beck.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And just on, I guess, 8.1.2, which is the one that we're dealing with right now.
No, we're at
8.1.1.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'd like to ask that paragraph C in the first, or item C in the first or recommendation, in other words, direct staff to work with area municipalities, be dealt with separately when we deal with it. And I'm prepared to move the entire recommendation, Mr. Chair. I think there are a number of things here where additional work is certainly merited. I do think that paragraph 1C is an area of duplication that we don't need to be dealing with here at the region, and so I won't be supporting that because that work is already underway, and I anticipate will be underway by others. Because part of the lens that I've looked through this, and I want to be clear. This is a generational, once in decade, once in a generation, hopefully, kind of issue. It's probably the kind of issue that was dealt with back when we had our troops coming back from World War II, and many communities needed to step up. And then there was a round of development that happened around affordable housing in the late 60s, early 70s, and here we are again. And so I think it really is incumbent on us to think outside of the box, see the kind of thought leadership that's necessary, and as I said at the beginning, I give staff perform beyond expectations on the reports and the ideas that are here. I will say, and I have to express some concerns around the engagement, because the reports all talk about the importance of collaboration and so on, and yet there was very little dialogue and collaborations with area municipalities on the three reports. I'll talk about one of them when we get to it in terms of 8.1.3. But that is an area of concern, and I know it's worked its way all through to the highest levels of our respective administrations around some of those concerns, and so I do believe we're well intentioned around collaboration, and committed to it. And so I just really want to say that collaboration needs to happen throughout the process, not sort of just when the after decisions are made and recommendations are being considered. I think that would go a long way towards recognizing the respective roles that each of us have and the increased roles we're going to have after Bill 23, particularly is ultimately implemented by the provincial government. But in the meantime, I will support this, and we'll just ask that C be dealt with separately, and would suggest that we don't approve that at this time. We can certainly come back to it, but that work is being done, and we'll all happily share it. And if the region wants to put it into a nice document altogether at the end, no objections to that happening. Thank you.
And what you're referring to is the needs assessments, Councillor Urbanovic. Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, I think before I accept your motion, I do have a couple other speakers. So Councillor Nowak and Councillor Liggett, who haven't spoken yet. And then we'll go to the second round for Councillor McCabe. So Councillor Nowak?
Yeah, no, I think I would respectfully disagree with my friend next to me today. The needs assessment may not be as critical to the city of Kitchener, but I think it's very important to the rural communities. So I think that should be there, should stay within the recommendation. And I would hope that the rural communities will be, consulted when it comes to this this issue. That's one thing I wanted to mention. The other thing I wanted to mention was, and if I may, could I ask another question then?
Certainly may.
What's the timeline on implementing some of these initiatives? I'm wondering, for example, if you were going to acquire, buildings and that sort of thing. Does that be 2025, would you think?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the question, Councillor Nowak. Yeah, if approved and supported today, Homes for All is a priority of this corporation. So we would mobilize our staff to ensure advancement throughout the course of this year. How long that work will take to do the proper engagement, proper collaboration, I would estimate it would take through the most of this year before we'd be bringing something back as a fully baked program that's designed for council approval for implementation sometime in 2025.
So there would have to be, if I may, there would have to be a budget, a budget for this, and that would have to be approved at budget time, I'm assuming.
Yes, I think to the earlier question from Councillor Craig, I mean, when we, as Ryan said, does the team puts together the actual plans of what the work will look like and how long it will take, if there are resource requirements that can't be accommodated within existing envelopes or shifting of envelopes, then that would come through the normal budgetary conversations.
Councillor Liggett.
Thank you. As I declared a pecuniary interest earlier, just want to let you know that that has been found to be not applicable at all here. So I'd like to say when Councillor Urbanovic made his comment, I agree to the fact that there's a lot of duplication here. For instance, the presenter had spoken about the area CAOs getting together with the region and talking about other lands in the region, for instance, churches and that. We are well on our way at the City of Cambridge on that particular part of this. And we've been having meetings since probably early last fall on this. And we continue to have that. We're going to be developing policies on that at our own municipality. I see a lot of duplication here when it talks about working with area municipalities. Each of the municipalities within the region will be looking at what they want to do about the renovation and demolition of rental housing protection policies. So even though we're being asked to work with the region, we will each have our own separate direction to go on this. So I just want to make that clear here that this may be the umbrella of the region, but we are all separate municipalities. And you can see that by Councillor Nowak's reaction to Mayor Councillor Verbanovich's ask here as well. So just so everybody realizes that we may vote in support of this, but when we go back to our own cities, our own municipalities, we will have maybe a different point of view with our staff. So we will work with our staff on these items, but we are separate entities and we have autonomy. So just want to make that clear.
Mr. Sweeney.
Through you, Chair. Councillor Liggett, thank you for those comments, Councillor Nowak and Councillor Verbanovich as well. I want to assure all of Council the last thing we want to do is duplicate effort, time, and resources. We've referred to the crisis of homelessness in this community. We've referred to the crisis of affordable and attainable housing in this community. We don't have the luxury of duplication. And so the idea here is there are a whole lot of policy alternatives and conversations that we talk a lot about. This is really the opportunity to put some pen to paper and look at what's already being done, who owns the pen on these things, and how do we collaborate and move the entire community that we all live and work in forward. So no desire on our part to unnecessarily duplicate time, effort, and resources.
Okay, second questions. Councillor McCabe, your name was here, but it's gone.
I actually just wanted to speak to the motion or the amendment that Councillor Verbanovic raised.
Okay.
So I don't know if this is the appropriate time.
Okay, I had one more speaker, so maybe Councillor Shantz.
I was going to speak to the motion as well, so if Councillor McCabe wants to go first.
We have a mover, but we don't have a seconder yet. So seconded by Councillor Wolf.
So I'm suggesting a friendly amendment to amendment to what Councillor Verbanovic said, to just amend item C to say, I don't have it right in front of me, but to say for those municipalities that are not conducting their own needs assessment. Oh, thank you. Here it is. So to continue to direct staff to work with area municipalities, similar to what Councillor Nowak just said, that municipalities who are not doing their own needs analysis, to work with those ones specifically, and then to have municipalities that are doing their own needs assessments, because the ones who've been able to receive the half money will share those. If you want to make that a lot more succinct. Does that make sense?
Okay with that, Councillor Braddock?
Well, I don't believe the clerk will advise us that a friendly amendment is okay. So I would certainly support that amendment. If Councillor McCabe is making it, I'll even second it if as an amendment.
So, yeah, Councillor Wolf seconded the motion.
The motion is staff's recommendation. Was what I moved. I just asked that one piece be dealt with separately, but with your proposed wording, I can certainly support that.
Yeah. I'm wondering if the easiest thing would be to deal with the motion and deal with this, take C out of the original motion and then come back and see if anybody wants to move item C. Does that make sense? Yes. I just think item C needs clarifying. Yeah. Is that okay with committee? Okay. So we have a mover, Councillor Verbanovic, seconded by Councillor Wolf, that we're dealing with 8.1. We're dealing with the first section, and this one is going to be without item C in it.
And sorry, my motion also included the other two paragraphs farther down. So it's only C that you're pulling out.
Okay, so I think my instructions from the clerk is that we want to deal with each one of those items or each one of those sections separately, if that's okay. Okay, so do you still want to speak to this, Councillor Shantz, to the one with C being taken out now?
I can probably speak to it because it sort of affects much of the recommendation. And that is that often our senior staff work together They meet together and they talk about what they're doing and projects. And so I would anticipate, without putting words into my staff or the staff of other municipalities, that this particular project would be one that they would discuss amongst themselves. And so to that end, I think the regional staff should be part of some of those discussions. I can support the recommendations as they're listed and as we're going forward.
Councillor Deutschmann.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Erb. So C is pretty straightforward. It's just asking our staff to work with area municipalities to create what we call a Waterloo Region Housing Needs Assessment. So that the level of work that's required will depend on each area municipality. So for example, with Kitchener, our staff would contact Kitchener. Kitchener would say, here's the data. That's done. Wellesley may not have that information, and so staff can assist in generating that. Like each area municipality, we work with them to generate to obtain the information that's needed. It's pretty straightforward, I would humbly submit.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think the concern is the responsibility for those of us who are in contractual obligations at this point in time rests with our commitment to the federal government, and so the timing and so on. I mean, these are projects that are led by us, and the timing needs to be driven by our reporting requirements, which may be different than the region's timing in doing this work. And so I have no concerns with sharing the data, and we will, as I indicated. I think that what needs to be clear, though, is that the region isn't leading and driving this process because, quite frankly, we're not going to potentially fail in our obligations to the federal government if the region's timing is slower than what our reporting requirements are.
Well, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, there's no timing in this material at all. So you could say, we could change that. I mean, if they can't get it done in the time required, they can't get it done. Or it could say, direct staff to work with area municipalities in accordance with the area municipality timetable to create a Waterloo Region housing.
I guess I would just reply and say I think Councillor McCabe's suggested motion was actually a good way of handling that, and certainly if she's still moving that at the time, I would be supportive of that.
Well, Mr. Sweeney wants to respond here.
I was just going to offer, with the it's semantics, but it might be helpful. The idea that we're trying to get at here, as Ryan mentioned, is to coordinate and pull together, not to supersede or overstep jurisdictional requirements. So maybe the word create is actually the cumbersome word here. And if what we're trying to do is actually assemble. And so how we assemble that, the timeline that we assemble, if that helps, the intent is, again, not to stand in the way of contracted requirements of our area municipalities under the HAF or any other obligation. And some area municipalities, as mentioned, might need some more of our support than others, but it's really about assembling that to help inform so that we don't lose sight that we should actually be doing that work and pulling it all together. So I would just offer those up, those suggestions up for staff. From a staff perspective, we could just change the word create to assemble, if that's helpful.
How does that sound, Councillor Van Wyk, that we would leave C in then with that? Or you still want to deal with it separately? I'd like to get to the question.
Listen, that's fine. I mean, I think my points will be recorded on the video and in the minutes. I do think the simpler solution was Councillor McCabe's, but I'm also okay with assemble if that's what staff is now suggesting.
Last call. So we have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor on that first section?
Of what? A and B?
Well, 8.1, which includes C.
The word assemble.
When I'm using the word assemble rather than create.
Okay, is that clear?
Yep.
Okay, so we change the word to assemble.
Yes. Okay. Use your e-scribe buttons to indicate your support. Okay, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you. You said you were prepared to move all three of them. Do you want to be the mover on the next one again, Councillor Urbanovic? Okay. I thought it showed everyone voted. Okay, I think that's a technical area. I think it was carried unanimously. Okay, on the next section under 8.1, dealing with the exploration to create renovation.
Mr. Chair, point of order, will
demolition,
that,
rental housing.
sorry, will that vote be clarified? It's for the public record, right? Right now it says 4-0. Oh, okay, thank you. All right.
Okay, you want to speak to the next section, Councillor Urbanovic?
No, I mean, I originally moved the whole thing, so.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Urbanovic, seconded by Councillor Wolf again. So to be clear, we're moving on, or voting on that section of 8.1. You use your e-scribe buttons to indicate your preference, please. Somebody missing. Okay, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you. The final section, advocating to the Government of Canada and the Government of Ontario to establish acquisition programs, moved by Councillor Urbanovic, seconded by Councillor Wolf. Use your e-scribe buttons to vote in support of this, please.
Chair, is this 8.3, 8.1.3?
No, 8.1.
Okay, thank you.
The third part of 8.1. Councillor James, are you in favor of this? Okay, thank you. That's carried unanimously. Okay, we are on to 8.1.2. Report 24001, Accelerating Affordable Housing on Municipal and Partner Lands, and this is for information only. Are there questions to staff? Councillor Urbanovic.
Thank you very much. And on this one, as staff have noted, the terms of reference of the working group haven't been approved yet, and that this is an area of ongoing discussion with area municipalities, and I know there's been some dialogue around those terms and particularly, should the working group be focused more around developing a standardized framework versus vetting specific lands and so on. We'll certainly leave that for staff to move things forward. I do want to, again, just be cognizant that a number of us in our HAF initiatives have included some land acquisition as part of that. And so I'm presuming that the region's not looking to coordinate that on behalf of the area municipalities because, again, we have those responsibilities directly with the federal government in terms of moving forward. I do have one question, though, and something that isn't included here that I think in terms of accelerating housing would be very helpful is, have we looked at the region's role around streamlining development review processes, because I know this is an area that is causing some constraints in the system right now. At present, there is a backlog in terms of regional review on and comment on some development applications, and that's resulting in us either having to choose to not complete them in the timeframes that the province has put on us, which means delays and also having to give back half of the permit fee, or approving them with holding provisions for a variety of things like noise, traffic-related studies, and other issues. And so I'm wondering if there was any consideration by the staff group in developing this report, in looking at that issue and seeing how the region may be able to do some work in this area, which I know would be well received by the development community, and some of those areas could or would potentially, even in a post Bill 23 world, still be relevant and be beneficial. So I don't know who from staff would tackle that. If that's Mr. Regier or someone else.
Do you want to start, Mr. Regier?
Yeah, thank you very much. Through you, Chair Erb. Thanks very much for the question. Yeah, so the streamlining of development application review processes has been something that we've been working on with area municipalities for years now, actually, and it's an area of continuous improvement for us. So I think I can safely commit our team to doing everything that we can to make sure that process is moving as smoothly as possible. We are implementing a development tracking system internally to make sure that we've got as seamless a process internally at the region to deliver on some very aggressive timelines that I know that the area municipalities are committed to. In addition, I think if Councillor Urbanovich would be able to, provide us with, the examples and any case studies that come forward, I'd be, really pleased to go over them with staff. And I know, also I'd like to mention that our Director of Community Planning, Danielle DeFields, has meeting on almost on a weekly basis, certainly on every 2 weeks, with the planning heads from the area municipalities to make sure that everything is going as smoothly as possible. But I can commit to making sure that our processes are streamlined to the extent possible at the region. Thank you for the question.
Great, thank you. We'll follow up with you on that. And yeah, I mean, I guess, this is something that particularly, I know from a municipal perspective, we've done a number of things at our end over the last several years, but I was particularly focusing around some of the regional pieces here. And I'm wondering if that can actually be put on a future, like on our list of things to report back on, and maybe staff can do a bit of an update report on how we're doing in that area. Thank you.
To see that it gets put on the tracking list, Clerk's Department will look after that. Councillor Deutschmann.
Thank you, Chair Erb. I just, in this report, so I was looking at page 1 of 5, and the last bullet point talks about to further build the portfolio of regional lands for affordable housing. Staff are pursuing strategic acquisition opportunities for council consideration across the region, and contribute larger blocks of affordable units to the overall housing stock. So I get to, again, my point. The region is purchasing land that is located within area municipalities. So I didn't see any comment in there about working with area municipalities in terms of this strategic partnership. I just have a concern about the region going somewhere because, as noted by Councillor Urbanovic, they have their targets they have to meet for the province. And some of these lands that maybe we identify for something we would like to do might be something they need to do to identify, to hit their housing targets, for example, or encourage builders to hit housing targets. So I'm just wondering, how is that playing out?
Mr. Chandy?
Thank you, through the chair. Absolutely, we're working with all of the area municipalities on any potential opportunities. Actually, all of the current opportunities that we are looking further have actually come to us through area municipal staff.
Okay, that's great to hear. Then the second question was, at page 3 of 5, there's reference to Charles Street Terminal. So, in terms of potential development, can you give us an update? Like, what can we expect with respect to that in terms of, the crisis that we're dealing with?
So we will be returning to council with an update on the Charles Street Terminal shortly. We are currently finishing up the community consultation on that right now, and we are just about to onboard the design architect after we've just finished the RFP process for that. So we're about to bring that person on board. That organization on board. They will do the next step of the design phase, which will lead to the RFP process, which we're still targeting for early 2025. We are also going through the record of site condition process right now with regards to the environmental contamination. That is underway, and that is planned. We are planning to file that also with the province by the start of 2025.
Mr. Chair, just one last thing, because King and Victoria has also mentioned that paragraph, but I don't know if there is any timeline with respect to that. I'm not familiar. Maybe you have something you can share, Mr. Chandy.
Right. So with regards to, right now it's more, we're still in that, visioning process for that specific site, and we're doing kind of a preliminary analysis of what that site might be able to generate with regards to housing opportunities. So that's early days.
Councillor Liggett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In talking with staff when this was in the agenda, where we're at with some of the stuff, they didn't receive the updated draft terms of reference on this until Friday. They haven't been given their comments to Matthew Chandy and the rest of the group, and they feel that it's pretty premature at this point in time because the scope of the committee hasn't even yet been confirmed. And I'm glad this is just for information, because we can't take a lot of this as information because it just hasn't been dealt with at the level that it should have been with my staff. I can't speak to everybody else, but and I also want to note that the use of lands that we have to offer up, I agree with what is stated in here on the bringing those lands forward, but we've already offered our lands up, and nobody has taken advantage of that. And we've done that twice. We did that through we've also offered that up through the half application. So we'll see where that goes from here. But I need it to be stated here that, it seems like this work is all being done with our staff, but when it actually hasn't. So on behalf of my staff and their comments here, that it's premature for them, I just want that to be stated. Thanks.
Okay, so for council's information, this report is for information purposes only, 8.1.2. No other speakers. On to 8.1.3, the property tax exemption for affordable housing. Are there any questions related to this? Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I'd like to move this motion and get it on the floor. I think this is, as we were discussing earlier.
Moved by Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Deutschman. Okay, and are you speaking to the motion,
Just that I should call the question. I do support this, absolutely. Okay. I think it's a I mean, I remember talking to Peter and Sean separately, I think it was around August or September, to ask about this as a way, a really tangible, pretty immediate way that we could provide assistance, as Sean in his delegation very clearly articulated. I think it'll make a significant difference in keeping existing rental stock and in renovating it to for use of low-income or middle-income renters. I think it's a great initiative, and I fully support it, and I hope the rest of council does as well. Thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you. Councilor Vanovic.
Thanks very much. The first question has to do with something identified in the report around the Ontario Trillium benefit. And this is the notion that potentially some tenants may be worse off if rents stay the same, but they're no longer eligible for the Ontario Trillium benefit if the tax status changes. And it suggests that this would be mitigated through advocacy work. I'm just wondering if staff can talk a little bit more about that, and have we had any indications from the province that that in fact they're open to that? I guess what I don't want to see is that somehow we're inadvertently, for some people, creating a bigger problem.
You want to respond to that, Mr. Petitpierre?
Yes, thank you through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we wanted to be transparent that this is a potential that's out there for tenants that are in receipt of this benefit. We think when we look at the benefit, it is a provincial benefit that is administered by the Canada Revenue Agency. The benefit right from the CRA website says that this is a benefit that's designed to help low to moderate income residents in Ontario pay for energy costs, sales, and property taxes. And so when somebody's exempt from paying property tax, or their landlord is exempt from paying property tax, they become potentially ineligible for this benefit that they're in receipt of, which we think at a staff level is counterintuitive to the intent of the benefits in the first place. We have spoken to other municipalities that have a property tax exemption program in place. They're aware of this. It has not been a major issue where it has been implemented previously, but we did want to be transparent in that it has the potential. We're not aware of how big of an issue this would be in our region. Depends on the number and people of who are applying, and we don't have the specific personal tax information of everybody that would be a resident in this building that would be eligible. We know that the maximum benefit available, again, through the CRA website, ranges, depending on your household size, from $400 to $800 for somebody that's in receipt of it. And for somebody on low income, that's an impact. We wanted to be transparent about that. Where it is an issue for residents, we can endeavor to work with them, find other ways to support them, and we would encourage advocacy to the provincial and federal governments to address this through the legislation. Whether or not they would be open to that or not, I can't say, but we think it's certainly appropriate action to take to further mitigate what may be causing some harm to residents as a result of implementing something like this.
Okay, and that's certainly something that, you know, we could partner with some of the other municipalities who have already implemented this on in terms of our advocacy work. In terms of the definition in the bylaw around average market rent, and I know there's all sorts of different definitions, how did we land at this one, and how do we sort of, does it create any problems in terms of the other definitions that exist?
Thanks again for the question. It's a good one, and one that we've spent a significant amount of time and education for myself on the wonderful world of municipal bylaw. So the way that I've come to understand this is thinking of the bylaw as the broader definition that enables us to create programs underneath. So our bylaw enables our ability to enter into a property tax exemption, as well as administer different benefits underneath it with specific program designs that fit underneath that bylaw. So the bylaw creates our ability to enable a property tax exemption at rents that are affordable, at average. We then create specific program guidelines specific to a property tax exemption. And that's where we really tighten up the definitions, the rules, and everything else that will guide a program like this. So the bylaw comes in and says at a minimum, you need to be achieving average market rents. Our program guidelines achieve that at a minimum and then go beyond. So if you're to be eligible for this program, the maximum rents for the units that would be in receipt of the exemption can be no more than 80% of the average market rent. So that's where we drill that particular requirement down even further. So if you think of as the bylaw as the overarching umbrella, and then the program guidelines as specific to this particular policy direction and implementation that we would use to guide eligibility for the program, where we tighten up that definition even more.
Okay, and the last question I have, Mr. Chair, is for either Mr. Sweeney or Mr. Petitpier, and it's obviously there's going to be an application component attached to this program, and we're going to need to process them. Do we have any concerns around resources to be able to process them, and what will happen if we can't get them done in a timely manner, because there's that whole component that'll need to be coordinated with the city to coordinate with MCAP on an annual basis, and we'll need the city or townships rather, and because they do the billing, and what will happen if we can't meet those timelines?
Through you, Chair. So this is where staff will roll their eyes when I say we'll take care of it. My answer though is it is our intent as a service system manager and lead in the environment in which we operate to take on that responsibility. My understanding is with the potential approval here today, that allows us to start putting further work into place and get all of this lined up for the next tax year. I'm looking to Craig in terms of when that would line up, which would also allow us to get a better handle on potentially how many units, conversations we need to have. And if there's, back to my earlier comment, if there's any resourcing requirements, we would build that into our business plan for 2025 and beyond, so that we can make sure that we can actually do what we're committing to today.
Okay, great. So with that, I will support the recommendation before us. I mean, my biggest concerns here, quite frankly, were on the level of dialogue with the area municipalities, because this is one that, is potentially going to involve all 8 of us if there's buy-in by the area municipalities to participate in it. And secondly, from an operationalizing point of view, needs to very closely work with the area municipalities, because it's us who send out the tax bills and have to work with MCAP and so on it. I know that I think our staff first received this just after the long weekend and were given a few days to provide comment. There really wasn't the opportunity for meaningful dialogue, and I just, again, really want to encourage staff as we go forward with some of the other work that's going to be so important, is that we really engage each other early on in these processes, because it just makes, I think, for better collaboration and ultimately better outcomes for everyone. But I will support it today. Thank you.
Councillor Foxton.
This is I don't know if it's a new point. When Ryan was stating the waiving of the regional and also the school board, do we have any right to waive the school board? The education, he said, education tax.
Yeah.
I didn't know we had that right.
Mr. Dyer, I think you've been in communication with them. Do you want to respond?
Yes, thank you. And through the chair, yes, there's a specific section in the Municipal Act under Section 110 that explicitly allows the service manager to exempt the region and the education components of the property tax. Further, there's a further clause that specifically allows a local municipality to then exempt the local share of the property tax.
Thank you.
And it might be helpful to add, you've been in conversation with the Board of Education, and this is works for them as well.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Wolf. Or I'm sorry, Councillor Shantz, sorry.
You did look this direction, but I didn't think it was my name. Thank you, and a lot of my questions have been answered going through, but I do have, I have one comment and one question, and my comment is to just sort of agree with Councillor Verbanovic that I think it would be really helpful if there was more conversation with our CFOs. That was a big source of discussion as I went through these reports. When it affects our municipality, I ask our municipal staff. So I wonder, before our council meeting when we ratify this, if there could be some discussion with the area CFOs, if that's a possibility. That was a question after all.
Mr. Dyer.
Yes, so through the chair, as it happens, the Waterloo Area Treasurers Group is meeting on Friday, and this item will be on the agenda.
Excellent. And one other question, if I can, and this is very specific in the bylaw. It talks about, if I have all my documents correct, 20 years. That this applies for 20 years, but the union cooperative talked about 60 years. Can you connect those?
Mr. Pettivier.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Shantz, and through you, Mr. Chair. I'll refer back to the answer I gave Councillor Verbanovic. If you think of the bylaws, the minimum that we need to set out our program requirements by. So the bylaw says if you're going to be, for the purposes of providing affordable housing, you need to do so for a minimum of 20 years. We then create program guidelines under the umbrella of that bylaw. And in our program guidelines, we say that in exchange for providing the property tax exemption, you need to remain affordable for 60 years. So we take the minimum requirement and dial that up to 60. So anybody that would be entering into an agreement with us would be for a term of 60 years at a level of 80% of average market rent.
So why wouldn't we say 60 years in the bylaw?
Good question, and again, through you, the bylaw as a piece of enabling legislation, and again, this is my own education and understanding of the world of municipal bylaw. This bylaw pertains to other programs that are also operated out of the region of Waterloo. It also, by setting a minimum standard, allows us flexibility if we want to create another program that we want lesser term or a higher degree of affordability. We don't want to dial it right down for one program specific in the bylaw because it can enable program guidelines for different programs under that umbrella at the bylaw level. I hope that helps.
Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to state that I strongly support this motion. I think Sean Campbell gave us a very good explanation of how this tax exemption would work. Right now, I think it's our only policy to acquire existing affordable housing. So I think we need to use all the tools we have to increase our increase and preserve our affordable housing. As we know, our region is the fastest growing region in all of Canada, and our house prices are going up 296% in the last 20 years. So we know the need is there, and I think that I commend staff and this council for doing everything they can and providing staff with every tool they can to increase our affordable housing supply. Thank you.
Councillor Deutschman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Erb. Yeah, just on the point, I did note that point that Councillor Romanovic brought up about the OTB, and I had dialogue with Mr. Campbell on that point previously. And just pointed out that, for example, there is an opportunity for any tenancy rental rate that's above the targeted number to comply would end up resulting in a reduction in the rent for the individuals in order to comply with the policy. So there's a benefit there. Also, too, there was a potential that any tenants that would be impacted, and it's my understanding, Mr. Regeer, you had mentioned, Ryan, you had mentioned that you cited some municipalities, but I don't think you indicated what the impact was in those areas, but that there was an opportunity for some to be referred to Building Better Futures or other programs for support as well. So there's lots of opportunities here for benefit all around for tenants. And also, too, just to carry on the point from Councillor Wolf, the union is on the ground running, and so this can be some more fuel to get us some places sooner than, while we're working on the work that we just approved today. So it's a great opportunity. Thank you.
Councillor Hunick.
Thank you, Chair. And forgive me, Commissioner Sweeney, but when I read the reports in their entirety, I recall certain pieces that I read, but I don't know where they came from. So I hope this is an appropriate time to ask this question. There was reference in the report to income testing upon initial occupancy, but not thereafter. Can you speak to what that means and the rationale for that?
Thank you. Ryan's on a roll, so I'll ask him because he probably remembers where he wrote that or somebody else wrote that better than I do.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Hoenick, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we want to make sure that where we are providing this property tax incentive, that the rents and the units being provided are being provided to the people that need them. And so people that are currently paying an affordable rent and are residing in a unit, and where we are finding that property to be eligible for the exemption, they wouldn't need us to provide their income information at that point. But on unit turnover, where the unit is vacated, we want to ensure that it is people at an income level that require the affordable rent that are going in. So we would require them to be income tested or come off our community housing wait list to make sure that it is geared to the people that an incentive like this is intended for.
Just to follow up, if I may, would that not mean, though, that a tenant's income could rise over time and they might not need the affordability anymore?
Go ahead.
You're correct, Councillor, and through you, Mr. Chair, that's true of all of our social housing properties. And really, what we're hoping is that that is the case, that people's incomes do rise and they are able to move on to different accommodations overall. A benefit and an incentive like this is to give them just that opportunity to do so. What we don't have the ability, either regionally or provincially, is to evict somebody or force somebody to leave once their income situation changes. And what we're hoping to do is provide them the opportunity to create and earn a higher income overall.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Lickett.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Ryan, when I look at the list of the Cambridge locations, the tax implications for the other residents, because this money that it's almost $8,500, $850,000 for the Cambridge portion alone. But when you add in the regions and the school boards, it comes up to $2.25 million that will have to be spread out over other properties in the region. So this money won't be lost to the community at this point, from what I can see. You can correct me if I'm wrong. When I look at that, and it's just for those that are existing, so everyone that comes on board will add to that. If we have a property that is a mixed for-profit and not-for-profit, will any element of the for-profit not be eligible? So would those units have to have the tax applied to them, or would they be tax exempt as well? And right now, I think we're only looking at what not-for-profits or co-ops. So in the future, will for-profits be eligible for this?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Liggett, and through you, Mr. Chair. And I may call on my colleague, Mr. Dyer, to help me out as well for the financial implications. So I'll try to recall your questions as well. So on the last one, I think it was in terms of partial exemption in a mixed, affordable, and market building. The answer is the affordable units in that scenario would be eligible for the property tax exemption under the guidelines that we have it. We think mixed income communities are healthy and they're types of buildings that we want to support. So we would support a partial exemption on a mixed use building only based on the units that are affordable in that property. Mr. Dyer, do you want to address some of the financial implications referenced?
Yes, through the chair, MPAC, so just thinking about the process that Ryan just explained, the capital facilities agreement that we would enter into with a provider would explicitly set out which units are affordable, which ones are not, which ones would be eligible for the property tax exemption. MPAC would then use that information to determine how much of the property would be returned as taxable versus how much of the property would be referred to as exempt. So that I think deals with the final question from Councillor Liggett from a revenue perspective. Again, going back to an earlier question, the regional and the municipal levy are not impacted. What will ultimately be impacted is the assessment base, and we would anticipate, as we've set out in the report, that the changes to the assessment base will happen over time. And relatively speaking, and certainly relative to the overall assessment base, both within Cambridge as a city and within the region as a whole, we expect will be a very minor impact in any given year. And certainly we can report back periodically to council with respect to the take-up, if you will, with respect to these programs and the financial implications.
Okay. Can I just get, so when you said it won't impact the levy, but that money that isn't going to be, I know you said assessment, but I just need clarity here. The money that would be lost off of this properties, does have to be redistributed over the whole balance of the population. Yes or no? Just so I know.
I think the short answer is yes. But taxes not paid by one property are then ultimately paid by all other properties.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I really appreciate the discussion this afternoon, and I certainly have supported I am supporting all three recommendations. And throughout the last, well, I guess we've been at this for 3 hours. We certainly, I think, have covered a lot of ground. It's an extremely wide-ranging report. But, you know, the words collaboration and cooperation have come up a number of times, and I think through the debate today, by members of council and particularly the mayors sitting at the table, we really, I think, showcased the collaboration amongst all of us and moving forward on this very important issue. So I think it bodes well for the document. It bodes well in terms of how we're proceeding, and I'm looking forward to us moving ahead and implementing the report.
One last question, Councillor Shantz, and then I'd like us to get to the recommendation and the Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Just from the last discussion that we had, is there any way, so we don't do an income test after the first intake of someone, I'm not sure if that's intake's the right word, but is there any way to review an income test? For example, conceivably we could have a number of people who are now not eligible in a unit that is assigned as a affordable, or sorry, got the wrong words here, but affordable unit. Is there some way to do that, or is that something that you can think about going forward? I support the motion, but just it's kind of bothering me a little bit.
Thanks again for the question. And there are mechanisms we can put in place to do further income testing. Our ability to evict tenants for earning over a threshold of income is non-existent, though. We through the Landlord-Tenant Board, we have no ability to actually do that. Tracking and monitoring income to understand how this program is supporting individuals and increasing earning opportunities is certainly a mechanism we can put into play. What we will monitor on an annual basis is the rent rolls, so keeping an eye on the rents for landlords that are eligible for this program to make sure that they're within the threshold stipulated in the agreements. And again, on unit turnover, that's when we have the ability to income test and allow entrance of a new occupant to that unit. So that's where our ability and nexus of control lies with regards to income monitoring, testing, and eligibility for tenancy.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor McCabe and seconded by Councillor Deutschman on item 8.1.3. If there's no other conversation or questions, I would ask you to use your e-scribe buttons to indicate your support. Mine is not on. I'm in favor. Just give me a second. Okay, that is carried unanimously. So thank you to the delegations that appeared who have been coaching us along in the last number of months, and special thanks to staff for these reports. It's just a transformational kind of initiative, I think, that we've taken. I know back in 21, when we were, when you bought Building Better Futures to us, and the goal was to build 2,500 units in 5 years, I think some of our responses were, oh yeah. Well, here we are 3.5 years into it, and I think we're at 2,300 homes. So I see this as another kind of a model that you brought before us, where you're going to push council to make more kinds of decisions that move this file forward. So thanks for the work you've done. I know it's been months in the making. What we've been doing in the past, we need to find new ways to advance this file, and you're helping us to do that. So on behalf of council, to the community, and to our staff, thanks very much. Can we have a 5-minute break? I'm going to answer a phone call. Can we take a 5-minute recess, please? I'd like to call us back to reconvene, please. Okay, we're on to item 8.2 under Equitable Services and Opportunities. Paramedic Services 203 Response Time Performance Plan results, and I'm going to invite Chief of Paramedic Services, John Riches, to present. Mr. Riches.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. You have before you today for information 2 reports. I'm going to speak to both of them in my presentation in the interest of time and efficiency. We, as a requirement under the Response Time Performance Plan, pieces of the legislation in the Ambulance Act are required to report to you on a Response Time Performance Plan results from the previous year. And then we also have traditionally every year shared with you other key performance indicators. So I'm going to go over them with you in general, and happy to take any questions at the end. A couple of things I'd like to start with. In the transcription of 2 of the appendices that are attached to these reports, there's actually an error in there, and when I get to that point, it's about the CTAS 2 to 5. I'll fix that error for you verbally. So next slide. There is a presentation, sorry. There we go. Thank you. If you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So happy to report that our vehicle responses in 2023 did increase, but not at the rate they increased in 2022. If you remember, I was in front of you last year at this time, and we reported an 11% increase in call volume in 2022 compared to 2021. In 2023, that only increased by 1%. So obviously that provided us a bit of relief, which we were thankful for. But it is important to point out that that 1% is only an increase on the 2022 results. It's still significantly higher than what we experienced in 2018, 2019, and 2021. We did see a decrease in our unit utilization, which I'll go over in more detail, but it still remains above the current master plan benchmark of 35% as approved by council. As you all know, I have shared with you in some email updates that offload delays have increased, and we experienced significant pressures on that from October to December, particularly in 2023, and then it continued in January to now. Our response times remain consistent with some variability, and happy to report that the number of code reds and yellows did decrease in frequency and proportion of time, although the median and maximum durations did increase, which I've explained in the past. Next slide, please. With respect to vehicle responses and unit utilization, I already explained the increase in 1%. Our unit utilization, we have changed the calculation by which we measure unit utilization to more accurately capture all the time spent when paramedics are dispatched from a call to the time they transfer care of the call. But we did see a 3% decrease from 2022 to 2023 in unit utilization, but that number is still well above the 35%. And in terms of mitigation strategies, and I would happily advocate that all of these mitigation strategies are working, and that is, of course, that council approved our shift to the high growth scenario in our master plan. We've added frontline resources to address call demand and unsustainable unit utilization, so we have seen the results of that. And we are further advancing the community paramedicine program to address high utilization 911 users. Next slide, please. There we go. There's a small typo on this slide, and that is in the first bullet. So we lost 625 ambulance days lost last year in 2023 to offload delays, and that's the equivalent of losing 3.5 12-hour ambulances per day, every day. So that's really significant, and I think Councillor McCabe, I believe, asked me via an email, what is the cost of that in terms of our budget, and it is fairly significant. If you look at what it costs us to staff and equip an ambulance, and if we lose that ambulance every day to being in the hospitals. There's significant costs of that, and my team and I are working on a more fulsome response to your question, Councillor McCabe, about that. Again, with mitigation strategies, some of these, a lot of these are working as well. And one is advocating and working with hospital partners to address system pressures that cause offload delays. A couple of weeks ago, all the hospital executives and myself met with the Assistant Deputy Minister responsible for emergency health services for the Ministry of Health. And essentially, that is a mechanism that the ADM uses to kind of bring hospitals and areas that are struggling with offload delay to the table to discuss what's happening. I thought the meeting was very, very effective, and all the hospitals reaffirmed their commitment to addressing offload delays, which we were happy about. And some of the other strategies we put in place are also working, like Fit to Sit, which we started in September. And then the other big thing that really is working related to offload delays is the designated offload nurse funding. If you'll remember, in previous years, this region received around $540,000 a year to be from the province to be split across all 3 hospitals. At this time, for this current fiscal year that ends in a few days, we received $1.654 million for designated offload nurse funding, and we have submitted a proposal for the 24-25 year that is very, very significant and increased related to the increase in nursing wages. But we do believe the designated offload nurse funding program is really working, and our hospitals seem to be really appreciative of that funding, and they are focusing on offload delays. The other thing that we're doing is expanding patient care model standards such as the treat and release, sometimes called treat and discharge, treat and refer, and alternative destination programs. The idea behind those programs, once approved by the province, is of course that we don't have to transport every patient we respond to in a 911 environment to the hospital. And if that's the case, we will get time back in the system for us, and the hospitals will also see some pressure relief for them. Next slide, please. With respect to response times, happy to report we are a whopping 1 second faster in 2023 on the 80th percentile than we were in 2022. So it's always better to tell you we're faster than we're slower. But that just demonstrates, I think, that my assessment is when council approved the high growth scenario for our master plan, it allowed us to get some kind of stability in the system, and that's what that demonstrates from my perspective. Same thing with regard to mitigation strategies. Offload delays continue to be a significant driver on our response times. As you can all appreciate, if our staff are stuck in hospital, their ability to get out and respond to the next call, which is literally waiting for them, is more difficult. And so that creates some challenges. The other thing we're doing, we anticipate that the MPDS system that I've talked to you a few times about at the Cambridge CAC will be implemented in January to March of 2026, and we've already begun on our implementation strategy for that. I will say that that implementation strategy will include working with corporate communications on a strategy to educate the public about the changes that are coming in advance of those changes actually occurring. Right now, the public calls 911 and generally speaking gets an ambulance right away, regardless of the acuity or how sick they are, and that creates challenges for us in the system, so we need to kind of reframe the question with respect to that. And then next slide, please. With respect to code reds and yellows, the percentage of time we spent in code yellow has decreased by almost 2.5% or just over 2.5% from 2022, so that's good. And in code reds, we've saved a 0.1% on the code reds, which is good as well. Again, it's better. The challenge, though, as I already pointed out, is sometimes when we get into code red and yellow, we're stuck in it longer. And our assessment is that is not because of resources, that is, again, because of all the challenges we're experiencing at the hospitals. And we are continually update our deployment plan to kind of reflect peak call demands and peak issues like that and staffing patterns, and we'll continue to do that as we continue to shift our program and our responses to making sure we keep our resources available for the highest acuity patients. Next slide, please. One thing that we do need to change, and I thought I'd bring this up in today's meeting, is that we need to update the names, definitions, and criteria to more accurately reflect our system status and prepare for that dispatch system implementation that I mentioned is occurring in 2026. The current names of Code Red and Code Yellow have been in effect in this region for almost 20 years. And the challenge with that is the actual criteria for Code Red and Code Yellow, so 0 ambulances available for Code Red and 3 or less available for Code Yellow, have not changed in those 20 years, despite the fact that we've continually added resources to address call demands, to population growth, and things like that. And so what we're probably going to do, and this is currently in draft, we have not landed on a final decision yet, is change it to a system status approach that more accurately reflects what our system status is, where we're at, and what escalation processes we can put in place when we start to see issues where we're reduced resources. And one of the biggest reasons for that is, as I mentioned, it's really great news that the province is going to implement MPDS at the Cambridge CAC in January to March of 2026. But the challenge with that is we are currently in our priority system that the CAC uses is code 1 to 4, code 4 being your highest acuity patient, code 1 being your lowest acuity patient. The province is changing that nomenclature to be a color-coded priority system. So we are going to be moving to code green, code yellow, code orange, code red, and code purple being your highest acuity patient. So for us for a crew to be on a code red, but then the system is also in code red, we think is confusing for the public and for staff. And so we need to change the nomenclature and the criteria. And what we're proposing is a three-level system status approach, and that would be code 0. So now everybody knows what a code 0 is. It's none are available. Code critical, which would be we're in a real crunch in terms of resources, and then code capacity, where we're starting to become into a crunch for resources. And you'll notice in the slide here that I gave you a range of 3 to 6 ambulances available. Oh, sorry, that's the next slide, please. 3 to 6 ambulances available or 6 to 10 ambulances available, and that will be adjusted based on how many resources we have deployed in the given hour of a day, because we change our deployment based on call demand and other things. It's what this allows us to do when we go to this is it allows us to create really good escalation pathways with our hospitals and other partners as we're addressing these situations. If we wait until we're in what is currently code yellow, which is 3 units available, by the time my team has contacted the hospitals to say, you got to release our crews, we're already in code 0, because 3 calls happen and we're already in code 0. So what we want to do is go to the system status approach that allows us to stay ahead of the curve as much as we can. As soon as we get to reduced resources, let's escalate with the hospitals. So that's the intent. And I will say to council that many other municipalities use these terms as well: code 0, code critical, and code capacity. So what I'm creating is not brand new or any of those things. And it just allows for that separation in terms of definition and understanding from what will be the new dispatch system. And I expect a councillor may ask if we are allowed to change the names of the new dispatch system, and the answer is no, we're not. That is a provincial thing and it's mandated. So in case that question comes up. Next slide, please. Also reporting to you on a response time performance plan, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we are required to report this to the province every year, and so that report is due to the province at the end of this month. And as part of our mandate, we present it to you first for information, and then we present it to the province. We met all of our compliance targets for 2023, and the results indicate that we were comparable to 2022, and despite all system pressures, we continue to respond and provide excellent care and respond as quickly as possible as we can to calls. Next slide, please. This is where some of the errors were in the appendices in the report, so I apologize for that, and I'll try and clear up any confusion that you may have had. As a reminder, we use the Canadian Triage and Acuity Scale to determine the acuity of a patient. This is used across the entire province and, in fact, the country. And what that allows us to do is certain patients meet certain CTAS levels. So as a reminder, CTAS 1 is your highest acuity patient requiring immediate resuscitation, and CTAS 5 are patients that are low acuity in nature, could wait for healthcare if they had to, situations like that. Under the sudden cardiac arrest, the Ministry of Health sets a target that 50% of the time we must arrive on scene, or someone must arrive on scene with a defibrillator in 6 minutes or less. Our service target here at the Region of Waterloo is 70%, and we met that target in 2023, and that target did improve compared to 2022. The other thing I'll point out is this target, we actually also use local area municipality fire department data because of their responses under the tiered response agreement. So this is a collaboration with our local area municipalities as well. Next slide, please. This is where the appendices, this is correct what you see on your screen, and it is correct in the actual report. It's in the appendices that this was incorrect. It said 70% in a lot of places, and it should have said 80%. But this is correct on the screen. And we, as you can see, in all cases, actually met or exceeded the response time plan, which I think is an excellent testament to our staff. And I'm happy to take any questions about that if needed. Next slide, please. We do need to change and update our response time performance plan for 2025. And the reason for that is to make sure that we are actually adjusting our deployment and our targets and our goals to reflect our need to respond to the highest acuity patients the quickest. And this is something that is done in many of our comparators, many other regional municipalities, large services like ours. I'll point out to council that we're probably the top 10 in terms of size of paramedic service in this region or in this province. And so we want to be compared to people or services that are similar in size to us, have similar demographics to us, a rural-urban mix, all those types of things. So we want to prioritize the highest acuity patients. We want to manage staff workload. And again, this is also about getting certain things taken care of in advance of MPDS implementation at the Cambridge CAC. So if you can go to the next slide, please, I can show you a comparator. So as a requirement of our response time performance targets and our results, this is actually available publicly on a Ministry of Health website. So anybody can look, and I'm happy to share with any councillor the link if they want to see it. But under sudden cardiac arrest, it is always 6 minutes. That is mandated by legislation, that be our response time target. For CTAS-1, it is also mandated at 8 minutes, so that's why you see the region of Waterloo and other services targets being the same. For CTAS-2 through 5, that is up to the service to decide how quickly they want to get to calls and what percent of the time they want to get there in that time. And you'll see there's a wide variety there, predominantly in the CTAS 4 and 5 category, which is where we think if we can adjust our response time performance plan to accurately reflect we're prioritizing CTAS 1, 2, and in some cases 3 patients, then that really does give us an apples-to-apples comparison to other paramedic services comparators within the province. And it does, I think, publicly state that our priority, by adjusting it this way, it publicly states our priority is on our highest acuity patients, although we'll try and respond as quickly as we can to everybody. And so what you'll have in August or September, my staff and I will be coming to council to request your approval for a change to the response time performance plan targets for 2025. So the purpose of today was just to kind of give you a heads up that this was coming. If you have any questions about it, any concerns, obviously we're available and happy to answer your questions. And that's all I have. I believe the next slide says questions.
Thanks, Chief Richards, very informative. We do have a number of questions. Councillor Deutschmann.
Thank you, Chair Erb. Thank you for your presentation. I just had a question on the whole offload nursing program. So how does that work exactly? Like you hear about it, right? Yeah. Oh, the offload nurse. What happens? And you talk about increasing investment in that. So is it like one nurse for one vehicle or multiple nurses or one nurse can handle multiple vehicles? What exactly goes on at the hospital?
Thank you for your question, and through you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I probably should have been more descriptive on that. I apologize. We get 100% funding from the province, so there's no hit on the tax levy for this. And what it does is it allows currently each of our hospitals to staff a position, a nurse position within the ER on a 24 hours a day basis, 7 days a week throughout the entire year, assuming they have staff. And each one of those positions, so there's one in each hospital, can take up to 4 patients that would be on a paramedic offload delay at a time. Okay. And the intent is essentially, and the way the hospitals and I have discussed this is, we're the client, we're paying for the service, that nurse works for our paramedic service patients. And that's how the hospitals have adopted it as well. There are challenges with it, however, Councillor Deutschmann, if I may, and that is that once that nurse takes on 4 patients, if we have a bunch of ambulances that show up, they end up on offload delay.
Yeah.
And so all the hospitals, I'm happy to report, are committing to patient flow improvement processes within their facilities to try and get us quickly as cleared as possible.
So is additional funding then to get more nurses available than just the one?
The ask for 24-25 is actually directly related to the change in the rate, the hourly rate for nurses as a result of Bill 124 and things like that the hospitals have experienced through the provincial government freezing public sector wages in certain cases. So we are still putting forth a plan that we want it to be funded for one nurse in each hospital 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The equivalent of, in terms of what the funding actually staffs, is about 14 to 15 FTEs across all three hospitals. Okay. So the funding's significant to the hospitals. That's 15 nursing
right.
jobs, right?
So one other question then, you'd said if you reached a critical situation like code red or zero,
yeah.
You said you can call the hospitals to release the crews? What does that mean?
So what our hospitals have asked for is before we get into code zero, like when there's nothing available and we're in the weeds, for lack of a better term, is they've asked for us to collaborate on an escalation process, which we already had informally, but it's about creating a formal escalation process that allows each hospital to use different mechanisms at their disposal. One of them could be, for example, that they surge. And what that means is they ask the floors outside of the ER to take on more patients to free up space in the ER, as an example. The challenge with that, however, is that takes time. It's not, you can't just move a patient or 10 patients in 5 minutes. Like, it probably takes a couple of hours. So that's why we want to change to the system status level so that we can give the hospitals as much lead time as possible that, hey, we're starting to get into the weeds here. Can you do anything like surge or anything else? Does that answer your question? Right, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Craig?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do appreciate the presentation, and I think the overall performance of the paramedic services is exemplary. My question really deals with the hospital chiefs and yourself meeting with ministry officials about the offload delays. And looking at Cambridge in particular, one of the big issues they have is long-term care beds, and people who shouldn't be in the hospital but should be in long-term care are clogging up the hospital in terms of and it filters right back through to the offload delays. Did you have a discussion with the ministry officials on this?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Craig, and through you, Mr. Chair. We discussed a wide-ranging number of topics at the meeting with the Ministry of Health. Ontario Health was there, which in my experience is the first time they've actually been present at these meetings. I've done other meetings in other municipalities, and it was just the Ministry of Health, Emergency Health Services people. So to have Ontario Health executives there was really helpful to us. And certainly what you're referring to, Councillor Craig, is what they call ALC patients, or alternative level of care patients. They do take up a large percentage of acute care beds in every busy hospital in the province, quite frankly. And it is a big challenge because these are patients who, had there been a better place to discharge them to, a long-term care home, retirement home, for example, then those beds would free up for acutely ill patients who need acute care. We did discuss it. You know, they were obviously receptive to our comments and our feedback, but there was no promises made at that meeting about that specific topic. Yeah.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just one further question, and I think, sir, you know I'm going to ask this about response times. And I've got the chart of response times here, and Cambridge has been historically, has slower response times than KW. Can you get into this, why this continues? Because I sort of warned you about a number of months ago, concerned about this. And also, I thought with the extra paramedics, ambulances, that this would bring us to a certain level of equity with the other two municipalities, but it doesn't show up. Can you explain to me why?
Through you, Mr. Chair, happy to explain, Councillor Craig. Thank you for the question. There's a number of things. I will say that I believe for Cambridge, the response time increased by 4 seconds from 2022 to 2023. So I would argue statistically, we're kind of holding our own, so to speak. But there's a number of reasons. The biggest driver on our response times in the whole region, and this is not just at Cambridge, but it does certainly apply to Cambridge, is offload delays. when our crews are stuck in hospital, it takes them longer to get out of the hospital to respond to the next call. Most of our paramedics, the first call they respond to in the day, they respond to from the station that they work out of, and then they transport that patient to the hospital, and then it's a cycle. They drop that patient off the hospital, they transfer care, and they move on to the next call. And we do have statistics. Our epidemiology and health analytics team is working on a report that can demonstrate how offload delays impact response times, specifically in Cambridge, but happy to do that for all municipalities if local area municipalities would like to see that. The other challenge, I would say, like there were a number of things that worked well for us last year. As I already reported, our call volume only increased by 1%, so that was certainly very helpful compared to 2022. And the other thing that worked very well for us last year was the investment that this council made in allowing our service to expand. I would argue that if we had not expanded, the response times would be significantly worse and there would be real challenges in terms of our service delivery. So I don't know if that really answers your question, Councillor Craig.
Well, I don't wish to be argumentative, but I think I'm going to meet you on a one-to-one and we'll have a good discussion about it, because this has been historic in terms of the slow response compared to the other two municipalities. And I really think Regional Council has to focus on how this can be improved. That's all I'm saying. I'm not in any way discrediting the efforts yourself or the service, okay? Yep. I'm just saying this is something that's been historic, and I'd like to see the improvement. Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
Councillor Schatz.
Thank you. Thanks for the report, Chief. And my question was very similar to Councillor Craig's. I know in the past we've seen some breakdowns by municipality. Can you speak to response times in the townships?
I can. They are obviously higher in the through you, Mr. Chair. They are obviously higher in the townships than they are in the cities. The biggest reason for that, again, is our crews are responding from the hospital back out to the townships is one of the biggest reasons. I would say we are cautiously optimistic that we have stabilized response times at this time. One of the things that we're talking about doing, I think it's fair for me to say this, is we think on a quarterly or biannually basis, what we'll do is provide a report to each local area municipality specific to their municipality. And then that will give you some, hopefully some trust and faith in the transparency of the data that we can give to you. We think that that's a reasonable request, and it's something that myself and my team are talking about. The other thing I should point out, and I appreciate your question, is response times are clearly very important to council and to the public and to us. But it is important to note that response times, in terms of how they impact patient outcomes, really only matters on our highest acuity patients. And so those are your C-test 1 patients, your C-test 2 patients. And so what we need to shift towards, and my team and I are working on, is shifting our deployment in conjunction with the change at the dispatch system in 2026 to save our resources for the highest acuity patients where the response times matter the most. And that might mean patients are waiting at home longer for us when they're lower acuity. But we think that that is a safe way to deliver the service to the community, and it mitigates risk as best as possible. So I know for many, many years, this council and many other municipal councils across the province have really focused on response times. But as we are modernizing our service, response times really becomes most important in terms of patient outcome for the highest acuity patients, which are, luckily for us, they're not the highest proportion of the patients that we serve. The highest proportion of the patients that we serve are mid to low acuity patients.
And just one more, if I could then. So the high acuity patients, did you say earlier that the response time reflects the first responder who gets there?
For sudden cardiac arrest specifically, the requirement is we have to show how often we get a defibrillator or a defibrillator gets to the scene within 6 minutes. And so that's specifically we ask for, and the fire departments all provide us willingly their data in terms of their response times to cardiac arrest. So that's the mix there.
So all the rest are just response times for paramedics?
Yeah.
Fire does respond to other things as well, right?
They do. If through you, Mr. Chair, we do have tiered response agreements with each of the municipalities. And in fact, I'm happy to report that there's a lot of good collaboration going on with us and the fire chiefs, specifically in the urban core, because that's where the largest volume of our calls is, but also more than willing to meet with the chiefs of the townships to adjust a tiered response to more accurately reflect what calls need all of us to respond and what calls don't.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hunick, we have 2 more speakers, and then because this is for information and Chief Riches is coming back, I'm going to suggest we move to the next agenda item. So, Councillor Hunick.
Thank you. I have a question and then a follow-up. Chief Riches, thank you for your report and your perseverance, especially in the face of offload delays that are particularly bad at CMH. I, like you, don't think that one offload delay nurse per hospital is sufficient. And so, off the top of your head, is there a number of offload delay nurses that would make more sense?
Thank you for your question, and through you, Madam Chair, I guess it is now. I would say that one of the things we want the hospitals to do is the funding that the province gave us last year and hopefully will give us this year is really significant. And what we want to do is give the hospitals the freedom to use that funding to target those times of day when offload delays are the most significant for paramedic services. So although right now the funding is 1 nurse, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the funding agreement allows them to adjust that. So if a hospital wanted to go to 2 nurses, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week at the same time, because that's during peak call volume and peak offload delay time, they could do that. The challenge I would say our hospitals are having, even if we got double or triple the funding to bring on more nurses, is it's important to point out that there are staffing issues at the hospital in terms of the number of nurses available to them. So we don't want to give them funding that they can't spend because they can't find the nurses to begin with.
Right, okay, thank you for that. As a follow-up strategy, in the meanwhile, while we wait for staffing and corresponding funding, have you looked into, would it be prudent, is it possible to designate a paramedic as an offload delay nurse at the hospital location rather than traveling with individual patients?
Thank you for the question, through you, Madam Chair. That's a really great question, and I will say that the funding from the province allows the hospital to use, they don't only have to use an RN for this position. They could use an RPN, they could use a physician assistant, and they could use a paramedic if they elected to hire those professions for the role. We have suggested this to all 3 hospitals. Certainly the Ministry of Health Assistant Deputy Minister suggested it at the meeting, and it's up to the hospitals to determine how that works within their labor relations environment, but they don't have to only be an RN.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just was curious about the common dispatch that you mentioned, and you said it'll be in effect in 2026, is that right? And what do you anticipate, how do you, or can you anticipate how that might change response times, or, you know, all the response times for yourself, maybe other services, how it may improve that? Maybe you can't speak for other services, but how you anticipate it will impact your crews.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, and through you, Madam Chair. So I want to make it clear, it's not a common dispatch that's coming in. What it is happening is the Ministry of Health Central Ambulance Communication Centre in Cambridge is moving from the current software system they use, which is called DPCI, or Dispatch Priority Card Index, to Medical Priority Dispatching System. And that changes the system from currently the dispatchers can prioritize a call in one of 4 priorities. They'll be able to prioritize it as one of 5 priorities in the new system. And MPDS is used all over the world. It is considered the gold standard of dispatching and prioritizing resources for medical calls for paramedic services. And it is known to be very good at determining the highest acuity patients. The challenge we have with the system right now is a large proportion of the time, over 80% of the time, we get dispatched out on a code 4, which is lights and sirens. We can't be reassigned to another code 4 because we're already on a code 4. But when we get there, the patient is actually a low acuity patient that didn't need that lights and sirens response. What MPDS will allow us to do is prioritize those lights and sirens responses to the highest acuity patients, and it'll be more accurate in that regard. So that's where we'll see some improvement. The hope being, of course, that if the system is more accurate in terms of determining acuity, then we can hold our resources. Even if we're really busy, if the lowest acuity patients have got to wait longer so that we've got resources for the highest acuity patients, that's the intent. And we won't be first in the province. A lot of really good data from other regions that we'll be able to use to adjust our deployment plan accordingly. Welcome.
Okay, now on 8.2.2. This report is for information. Are there any questions for staff? Okay, seeing none. We're on 9.1. Council Committee Tracking List received for information. 9.2, written correspondence, again, received for information. Other business, is there any other business? Okay.
Mine is just a quick thing. On this upcoming Saturday is International Women's Day, so I just wanted to acknowledge our staff and colleagues and in celebrating International Women's Day. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. All right. Our next meeting is April 9th, 2024, and that's Community and Health Services meeting will be held on April 9th, 2024, and we will now start a vote to adjourn the meeting. Do we have a mover? Councillor Hunick, Councillor James? Please use the yes or no button to vote. The meeting is now adjourned. Whatever.